A cryptic telegram lures Hercule Poirot to the fog-choked Grimstone Vale, where a lord has vanished and a blood-stained glove whispers of murder. Who is the serpent coiling through a web of lies, forged wills, and hidden crypts? Why does a clock stand frozen at 3:13 a.m. as Poirot unravels a conspiracy of greed and betrayal? A shadowy figure watches from the mist. Will he unmask the killer before the next strike? The truth lies in the veil, but at what cost? Chapter 1. The enigmatic telegram. The rain lashed against the tall windows of Hercule Poirot's London flat, a relentless tattoo that seemed to echo the restless pulse of the city beyond. It was a dreary October evening in 1938, the kind that made one grateful for a crackling fire and a cup of steaming tisane. Poirot sat in his favorite armchair, a model of geometric precision with its polished mahogany arms. His small hands folded neatly over a copy of the Times. His mustache, meticulously waxed, gleamed like a pair of polished sabers in the firelight. The world, he mused, was growing increasingly untidy. Wars brewing. Alliances shifting, but his own corner of it remained impeccably ordered. A sharp rap at the door shattered his reverie. Poirot's gray eyes, sharp as a falcon's, flicked toward the sound. His valet, George, had retired for the evening, and callers at this hour were rare. Sitting the newspaper aside with a precise fold, Poirot rose, his patent leather shoes clicking softly on the polished floor. He opened the door to find no one, just the dim glow of the hallway's gaslight and a faint whiff of damp wool. But there, on the threshold, lay a small, cream-colored envelope, its edges curling as if it had braved the storm outside. Poirot's lips pursed. "Mon Dieu, what is this now?" he murmured, stooping to retrieve the envelope. His fingers, gloved in their habitual fastidiousness, turned it over. No address, no stamp, only his name, M. Hercule Poirot, scrawled in jagged, urgent ink. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the strokes uneven, as if penned in haste or fear. He returned to his armchair, slicing the envelope open with a silver letter opener shaped like a miniature rapier. Inside was a single sheet of paper, bearing a telegram's stark, typewritten lines. "Grimstone Vale hides a serpent's coil. Lord Vane gone. Danger in the fog. Come at once. Trust Nitro. 1. No signature. No senders. Details only. Those cryptic words. Each one a dart, piercing the calm of Poirot's evening. Grimstone Vale, a name he vaguely recalled, was a small town nestled in the Dorset hills, a place of old money and older secrets. Lord Reginald Vane, a reclusive aristocrat, was known for his vast estate and rumored ties to shadowy financial ventures, but gone, vanished, dead, or fled. And this serpent's coil, a metaphor, a code, or something more sinister? Poirot's little gray cells hummed with curiosity. He glanced at the clock. 9:47 p.m. The last train to Dorset left Waterloo Station in an hour. Most men would hesitate, dismiss such a note as a prank or a trap. But Hercule Poirot was not most men. A puzzle, however dangerous, was a siren's call to his methodical mind. He rang for George, who appeared with the promptness of a well-oiled machine, his face betraying only the faintest flicker of surprise at the late summons. "George, my good man," Poirot said, adjusting his tie with a flourish. "Prepare my valise. It's a small one, with the essentials. We depart for Grimstone Vale tonight." "Very good, sir," George replied, his tone as neutral as ever. "Shall I arrange for a taxi to Waterloo?" "Oui, precisement." And George informed Captain Hastings. "He may wish to join me, though I suspect he will grumble about the hour." As George glided away, Poirot reread the telegram, his fingers tracing the words, "Trust no one." A challenge, yes, but also a warning. He slipped the note into his waistcoat pocket, his mind already mapping the mystery ahead. Grimstone Vale awaited, and with it, a darkness that even the fog could not conceal. The train to Dorset was a rattling beast, its compartments chilled by drafts that seeped through the windows. Poirot, wrapped in a wool overcoat, sat opposite. Captain Arthur Hastings, whose good-natured face was creased with a mix of excitement and exasperation. Hastings, ever the loyal companion, had agreed to join Poirot despite the late hour. Though not without protest. "I say, Poirot, this is all rather sudden," Hastings said, stifling a yawn. "A telegram out of nowhere, and off we go into the wilds of Dorset. What if it's some crank playing a trick?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "A crank, mon ami? Perhaps, but a crank who knows of Lord Vane's disappearance and speaks of serpents in danger. No, this is no jest. The mind behind this telegram is sharpened, frightened." Hastings leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "You know something about this Lord Vane, don't you?" Poirot tilted his head, a gesture both modest and theatrical. "A little. Lord Reginald Vane, a man of wealth and mystery, inherited Grimstone Hall some 20 years ago. He is said to be a recluse, rarely seen beyond his estate. There are whispers always, whispers of investments in foreign ventures, perhaps not entirely legal. But disappearance, that is new." The train lurched, and outside, the world was a blur of rain and shadow. Hastings shivered, pulling his scarf tighter. "Sounds like a grim place, this Grimstone Vale. In that telegram serpent's coil. Gives me the creeps." "Courage, Hastings. The creeps, as you say, are but the prelude to clarity. We shall find order in this chaos." By midnight, the train deposited them at Grimstone Vale's tiny station, a lonely platform swallowed by fog. The air was thick, carrying the scent of wet earth and something sharp as smoke perhaps, or decay. A single lantern swayed above the ticket office, its light barely piercing the mist. A gaunt station master, his face like crumpled parchment, handed Poirot a folded note. "Left for you, sir," he rasped, his eyes darting nervously. "By a lad, not an hour ago." Poirot unfolded the note, his gloved fingers steady. In the same jagged handwriting as the telegram, "Grimstone Hall. Ask for Crawley. Beware the serpent." Hastings peered over his shoulder. "Crawley? Who's that?" "Butler, I presume," Poirot said, tucking the note away. "Come, mon ami, the game is afoot." A horse-drawn cab, its driver, muffled in a scarf, carried them through the fog to Grimstone Hall. The road wound through gnarled oaks, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. Hastings muttered about ghosts, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere, piecing together the puzzle. A missing lord, a cryptic warning, a butler named Crawley. The cab halted before a wrought-iron gate, beyond which loomed Grimstone Hall, its Gothic spires piercing the mist like daggers. The hall's entrance was a cavernous maw, flanked by stone gargoyles whose eyes seemed to follow them. Poirot knocked, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The door creaked open, revealing a tall, thin man in a butler's livery, his face pale and lined, his eyes like twin pools of anise. "Mr. Poirot, I presume?" the man said, his voice low and clipped. "I am Crawley. You were expected." "Expected?" Hastings blurted. "By whom?" Crawley's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "The house, sir. It has a way of knowing." Poirot raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, stepping into the vast foyer. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood and wax, and a massive chandelier hung above, its crystals dulled by dust. A grand staircase spiraled upward, its banister carved with serpentine motifs coiling snakes, their eyes inlaid with green glass. Hastings nudged Poirot, pointing to the carvings. "Serpent's coil, eh?" he whispered. "Precisement," Poirot murmured, his gaze sweeping the room. Monsieur Crawley, you received word of our arrival. From whom? Crawley hesitated, his fingers twisting a silver ring on his left hand. A message, sir, delivered this evening. Anonymous, I'm afraid. Said to expect a detective. From London. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And Lord Vane. He is missing. Nest, see, pa. Crawley's face tightened. His lordship has not been seen since Tuesday last. 5 days now. He retired to his study after dinner and vanished. No note, no sign of struggle. It's only he stopped, swallowing hard. Only what? Pressed, his voice sharp. A window, sir, in the study, was found open, the curtains torn. Take us there, Poirot said, his tone brooking no delay. The study was a fortress of oak and leather, its walls lined with bookshelves that reached the ceiling. A massive desk dominated the room, its surface cluttered with papers, an inkwell, and a brass paperweight shaped like a coiled snake. The grandfather clock in the corner stood silent, his hands frozen at 3:13. Poirot's gaze lingered on it, his fingers tapping his mustache intermittent. He said softly, "The clock, it does not tick. It was stopped, perhaps." Crawley nodded. "Yes, sir. It's wound weakly, but it stopped that night. No one touched it since." Hastings circled the room, peering at the open window. The fog outside was a living thing, curling through the gap like ghostly fingers. "No one could climb out here," he said. It's a sheer drop to the garden. Poirot approached the desk, his eyes scanning the papers. They were financial documents, ledgers, contracts, all bearing Lord Vane's spidery signature. Sheet caught his attention, a letter, half finished, addressed to a Mr. Harrow. The words were innocuous business matters, investments, but the final line was scratched out, illegible except for one word. "Serpent, Monsieur Poirot," murmured. The serpent, again. This is no coincidence. Crawley shifted uncomfortably. "There's talk, sir, of a curse. It's a Vane family. They've always had shadows. It's old stories of betrayal, of secrets buried in the veil." "Curse," Hastings scoffed. "Sounds like village gossip." Poirot's smile was thin. "Gossip, mon ami, is often truth in disguise, Monsieur Crawley. Who else resides in this house?" "Lady Vane, his lordship's widow," Crawley said. "She keeps to her rooms." "Then there's Miss Clara, the warded distant cousin, taken in years ago, and the staff, Mrs. Elspeth, the housekeeper, Silas Crow, the gamekeeper, and myself." "Well," Poirot said, "I shall speak with them all. But first, the garden. The window suggests an exitor, an entrance." The garden was a labyrinth of fog and shadow, its paths lined with thorny roses and overgrown yews. Poirot moved with purpose, his small flashlights slicing through the mist. Hastings followed, muttering about the cold. Near the base of the study's window, Poirot paused, his beam catching a glint of metal. He knelt, retrieving a silver cigarette case, its surface engraved with the initials R.V. Lord Vane's. Hastings asked. "Perhaps," Poirot said, turning it over. A faint smear of red marred the edge, blood, dried and flaking. He wrapped it carefully in a handkerchief, his eyes scanning the ground. A few paces away, half hidden by a rose bush, lay a single glove, its white fabric stained with more blood. "Soccer blue," Poirot whispered. "The plot. It thickens." Crouched beside him. "Whose glove is it?" "Vane's." Poirot shook his head. "It's too small for a man's hand, and the blood is fresh, no more than a few days old. We must learn who wore this glove, and why it lies here beneath the window of a missing man." Crawley, who had followed silently, cleared his throat. "Sir, there's something else. The staff, they're frightened. Mrs. Elspeth swears she heard a scream that night. At 3:13, same as the clock. But she saw nothing." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A scream, a stopped clock, a glove with blood." We, the little gray cells, they are at work. Monsieur Crawley, summon the household. Tomorrow, Hercule Poirot shall begin to unravel this serpent's coil. As Crawley hurried back to the hall, Hastings shivered, pulling his coat tighter. I don't like this place, Poirot. It's as if the fog itself is watching us. Poirot's smile was serene, almost amused. Let it watch, mon ami. The fog may hide the serpent, but it cannot hide from Hercule Poirot. Chapter 2. The clock that stopped the fog over Grimstone Vale clung like a shroud as dawn broke, its gray tendrils weaving through the gnarled oaks surrounding Grimstone Hall. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand foyer, his patent leather shoes gleaming against the worn marble floor, his mustache as precise as a draftsman's line. The blood-stained glove, now tucked safely in a silk-lined box, weighed heavily on his mind. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings rubbed sleep from his eyes, his usually cheerful demeanor dampened by the hall's oppressive air. Poirot, I barely slept a wink, Hastings grumbled, adjusting his scarf. This place creaks like a haunted ship, began the glove ghastly business. Patience, mon ami, Poirot replied, his voice a calm counterpoint to the morning's chill. The glove is but the first thread in the tapestry of this mystery. Today, we examine the heart of it, the study, where Lord Vane vanished and the clock stands silent. The butler, Crawley, appeared at the foot of the grand staircase, his gaunt face paler in the daylight. The serpentine carvings on the banister seemed to writhe as he descended, his silver ring catching the light from a dusty chandelier. Breakfast is served, gentlemen, he said, his tone clipped. Lady Vane requests your presence afterward. In the drawing-room, merci, Monsieur Crawley, Poirot said, his gray eyes sharp. But first, the study. I wish to see it in the light of day. The window, the clock, these things, they speak when questioned correctly. Crawley's lips tightened, but he nodded. As you wish, sir. Sway. The study was a fortress of oak and shadow, its air thick with the scent of old leather and ink. Sunlight struggled through the fog, filtering through the open window, where the torn curtains swayed like ghosts. The grandfather clock loomed in the corner, its face frozen at 3:13, its pendulum still as death. Poirot circled it, his gloved fingers tracing the carved mahogany. Noting the faint scratches around the keyhole, interesant, he murmured. This clock, it has not merely stopped, it's been made to stop. See here, Hastings, the keyhole is tampered with, a deliberate act. Hastings peered closer, his brow furrowing. Sabotage, but why stop a clock? To mark a time, perhaps, a smite. The time of an event, perhaps the moment Lord Vane was taken, or worse. 3:13 a.m., the hour Mrs. Elspeth heard the scream. We must learn what happened at this precise moment. Poirot turned to the desk. It surfaced a chaos of papers and ledgers. Among them was the half-finished letter to Mr. Harrow, the word serpent scratched out in a frenzy. He sifted through the documents, his fingers deft as a pianist's. One sheet caught his Aja ledger page with columns of numbers, each paired with initials, RV, LV, CH. The sums were vast, tied to land purchases in distant colonies. But a single entry was circled in red ink. Transferred to CH, £50,000. Serpent's coil, mind jaw, whispered. The serpent again. This is no myth, Hastings. It is a code, a name, a scheme. In this, CH perhaps, R. Mr. Harrow. Hastings frowned. A financial deal gone wrong. Could Vane have been kidnapped over money? Or eliminated? Poirot said, his tone grave. But we need more. The glove suggests violence, the clock a moment, this ledger a motive. Let us explore further. He moved to the bookshelves, their spines a mosaic of leather and gilt. One book, a treatise on heraldry, was slightly askew. Poirot pulled it, and with a soft click, a panel slid open behind the shelf, revealing a small iron safe. Its lock was scratched, as if someone had tried and failed to force it open. "Soccer blue," Poirot exclaimed. "A hidden safe." Hastings, fetch Crawley. "We must know if Lord Vane kept secrets here." Hastings hurried out, returning with the butler, whose eyes widened at the sight of the safe. I didn't know it was there, sir," Crawley stammered. His lordship was private about his affairs. Poirot's gaze was piercing. "And yet, someone knew. These scratches, they are recent. Cue me, Monsieur Crawley, who had access to this study." "Only his lordship, sir, and Lady Vane, occasionally. The staff were rarely permitted inside." "Bean, we shall speak with Lady Vane. But first, the safe. It is locked, and I suspect its contents are key to our enigma." As Crawley retreated, Poirot examined the safe's lock, his magnifying glass glinting in the dim light. A combination lock, Hastings, 6 digits, and see here a faint smudge of chalk on the dial. Someone marked it, perhaps to guess the code. Hastings leaned in. "Chalk? That's odd. Could it be a servant's doing? Or a clue left by Lord Vane himself?" Poirot said. "We shall test this later. For now, to the drawing room." Day. Drawing room was a study in faded opulence, its velvet drapes heavy with dust, its fireplace cold despite the morning's chill. Lady Vane sat by a tall window, her black silk dress absorbing the light. Her face was sharp and regal, her eyes shadowed with something grief, fear, or perhaps calculation. A young woman, Clara, the ward, stood nearby, her auburn hair pinned tightly, her hands clasped as if restraining a secret. "Mr. Poirot," Lady Vane said, her voice cool as marble. "You've come to stir our quiet sorrow. My husband is gone, and yet you seek mysteries where there are none." Poirot bowed, his smile polite but unyielding. "Madame, a man does not vanish without trace, leaving only a blood-stained glove and a stopped clock. The telegram that summoned me speaks of a serpent's coil. Do you know this phrase?" Lady Vane's fingers tightened on her fan. "A village superstition. The Vane family has long been plagued by tales of betrayal serpent, they say, that coils around our wealth." "Nonsense." Clara shifted, her eyes darting to the floor. Poirot noticed, his gaze softening. "Mademoiselle Clara, you have heard this tale." Clara hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. Only whispers. "Sir, the servants talk of a curse, of a debt unpaid, but I know nothing more." Chapter 3. The widow's veiled warning. The fog over Grimstone Vale hung heavy as a funeral pall, its grey tendrils curling around the Gothic spires of Grimstone Hall like the fingers of a restless spirit. Poirot stood at the threshold of the drawing room, his diminutive figure a beacon of order amidst the chaos of mystery. His patent leather shoes gleamed against the worn parquet, and his mustache, waxed to symmetrical perfection, seemed to bristle with anticipation. The blood-stained glove from the garden and the stopped clock at 3:13 a.m. in Lord Vane's study weighed on his mind, as did the hidden safe and the ledger's cryptic reference to a serpent's coil. These were no mere threads, but a tapestry of intrigue, and Poirot's little grey cells were already weaving them together. Captain Arthur Hastings stood beside him, his usually jovial face shadowed by the hall's oppressive air. "I say, Poirot," he whispered, adjusting his scarf, "this place feels like it's watching us. That clock, business 3:13, the scream, the glovets, all so dashed eerie." "Eerie, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice a calm melody against the morning's chill. "It is but the stage for our drama. The clock marks a moment, the glove a crime, and today we shall uncover what lies behind the veil of this household's secrets." The drawing room was a relic of faded grandeur, its velvet drapes heavy with dust, its rosewood furniture polished but worn. A cold fireplace gaped like an open wound, and tall windows admitted only slivers of grey light through the fog. Lady Eleanor Vane sat by one such window, her black silk dress absorbing the dim glow, her face half hidden by a lace veil that fluttered with each measured breath. Her hands, gloved in black, clutched a silver fan, its edges etched with serpentine motifs, a subtle echo of the telegram's warning. Beside her stood Clara Vane, the ward, her auburn hair pinned tightly, her green eyes darting like a deer, sensing a predator. The air was thick with unspoken tension, as if the room itself held its breath. "Mr. Poirot," Lady Vane said, her voice cool as polished marble. "You intrude upon our grief. My husband is gone, and yet you seek mysteries where there are only shadows." Poirot bowed, his smile polite but unyielding. "Madame, shadows often conceal truth. A telegram summoned me here, speaking of a serpent's coil in danger. A glove stained with blood lies beneath your husband's window, and a clock stands frozen at the hour of a scream. These are not shadows, but signposts. Tell me, what is this serpent's coil?" Lady Vane's fan snapped shut, a sharp sound like a breaking twig. "A village fable," she said, her eyes narrowing behind the veil. "The Vane family has long been plagued by tales of betrayal of serpent. They call it that coils around our wealth. Superstition, nothing more." Clara shifted, her hands twisting a handkerchief. Poirot's gaze softened, but his eyes missed. Nothing, the slight tremor in her fingers, the way her gaze flicked to Lady Vane before dropping to the floor. "Mademoiselle Clara," he said gently, "you have heard this tale, n'est-ce pas? What do the servants whisper?" Clara hesitated, her voice a whisper. "They say the serpent is a curse, a debt unpaid from long ago. Something about a betrayal in the family, a secret buried in the veil. But it's just talk, sir, just talk," Poirot mused, his tone deceptively light. "Talk, like fog, can obscure the truth we're revealing. Madame, you were in the study often, were you not? Did Lord Vane speak of this serpent, or of a man named Harrow?" Lady Vane's veil trembled, betraying a flicker of unease. "Harrow, a business associate, nothing more. Reginald's affairs were his own. I did not pry." "Being?" Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "Then we shall pry elsewhere. The study holds more secrets, I think. Hastings, come." As they left the drawing room, Hastings muttered, "She's hiding something, Poirot. That valet's like she's wearing a mask." "Precisely," Poirot replied. "A veil hides the face, but the eyes, they speak. Lady Vane fears something or someone, and Mademoiselle Clara knows more than she says. We must proceed with care." They returned to the study, where the air was heavy with the scent of old leather and wax. The grandfather clock stood silent at 3:13, its carved mahogany face a mute witness to the night of Lord Vane's disappearance. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on the desk's clotter ledgers. It's a half-finished letter to Mr. Harrow and a brass paperweight shaped like a coiled snake. He moved to the bookshelves, his gloved fingers tracing the spines until he paused at a volume of Dante's Inferno, slightly askew iridescent. He murmured, pulling the book. Soft click echoed, and a panel slid open, revealing the iron safe from the previous day. Its lock, scratched and stubborn, gleamed in the dim light. But something new caught Poirot's eye, a faint smudge of wax on the shelf, as if a candle had dripped recently. "Hastings," Poirot said, producing his magnifying glass, "observe this wax. It is fresh, no more than a day old. Someone was here, searching in the dark." Hastings peered over his shoulder. "Searching for what? The safe?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, "or something else. This room, it is a vault of secrets. We must look beyond the obvious." He turned to the fireplace, its hearth cold and gray. Among the ashes lay a scrap of paper, charred at the edges but intact enough to reveal a photograph's corner a woman's face, her features sharp and familiar. Poirot retrieved it with a pair of tongs, his eyes narrowing. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "This is no ordinary photograph. See the tear-jagged, deliberate. The other half is missing, and with it, a piece of our puzzle." Hastings frowned. "Who is she?" "Lady Vane." "Perhaps," Poirot said, slipping the fragment into a silk envelope. "Okay. But the tear suggests concealment. We must find the other half." Their search was interrupted by a soft knock. Mrs. Elspeth, the housekeeper, stood at the door, her wiry frame wrapped in a gray shawl, her eyes wide with unease. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "there's something you should see in the portrait gallery. It's not right." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Not right? Lead on, madame." The portrait gallery was a long, narrow hall, its walls lined with stern-faced vanes staring down from gilded frames. The air was thick with dust, and the fog outside pressed against the tall windows, casting eerie shadows. Mrs. Elspeth led them to a portrait of a man in Regency attire, his eyes piercing, a faint scar crossing his cheek. The frame was slightly crooked, as if recently disturbed. "This one," Mrs. Elspeth whispered. "I found it like this morning. Wait, there's something behind it." Poirot stepped forward, his fingers probing the frame's edge. With a gentle tug, it swung outward, revealing a hidden recess. Inside lay a small silver locket, its surface engraved with the initials RV and a coiled serpent. Poirot opened it, revealing a miniature of the same woman from the burned photograph. Sharp features, dark eyes, and a hint of defiance. "Soccer blue," Poirot said softly. "The same woman. But who is she, and why is she hidden here?" Mrs. Elspeth wrung her hands. "There's talk, sir, of a scandal long ago. A woman who brought shame to the Vanes, cast out before Lord Reginald's time. They say her spirit haunts the Vale." Hastings shivered. "A ghost? Surely not, Poirot." Poirot's smile was thin. "Ghosts, mon ami, are but stories we tell to hide the truth. This woman is no spirit. She is key to our enigma." They examined the locket. A faint creak echoed from the hall's far end. Poirot's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the shadows. "Feet, Hastings," he whispered, moving silently toward the sound. A narrow door, half hidden by a tapestry, stood ajar. Beyond it stretched a secret passage, its stone walls damp and cold, its air heavy with the scent of earth. "Mon Dieu," Poirot said, his flashlight cutting through the dark. "A passage hidden within the walls. This house, it is a labyrinth of secrets." The passage wound downward, its steps uneven, leading to a small chamber. There, on a dusty table, lay the other half of the torn photograph. Poirot pieced it together, revealing the full image. The woman stood beside a man with a scarred cheek, identical to the portrait's subject. His arm was around her, but his eyes held a glint of menace. "Voilà," Poirot said, his voice triumphant. "The other half, and with it, a new player in our drama. This man has scar, his presence links to the serpent's coil. Who is he, and why was this photograph torn?" Hastings frowned. Could he be Harold? The ledger mentioned ACH. "Perhaps," Poirot said, tucking the photograph away. "But we must tread carefully. This passage, this locket, this photograph day are pieces of a puzzle, and the widow's warning hides the key." Chapter 4. The Gamekeepers. Alibi. The fog over Grimstone Vale clung like a conspirator's cloak, shrouding the twisted oaks and muffling the distant cry of a solitary curlew. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of Grimstone Hall's frostbitten lawn, his overcoat buttoned against the morning's bite, his mustache a pair of polished crescents beneath sharp gray eyes. The blood-stained glove, the stopped clock at 3:13 a.m., The hidden safe, the ledger's cryptic serpent's coil, K, and the torn photograph of a scarred man formed a mosaic of menace in his mind. K. Each clue was a note in a discordant symphony, and Poirot, ever the conductor, sought the melody beneath. Captain Arthur Hastings trudged beside him, his boots sinking into the damp earth, his face a portrait of unease. "I say, Poirot," he muttered, breath clouding in a chill, "this veil gives me the shivers. That photographed, that scarred chap, it's as if he's watching us from the fog." "Mine ami," Poirot replied, his voice a velvet blade. "It is not the fog that watches, but the truth, waiting to be seen. The photograph, the locket, they point to a man. Perhaps this, Mr. Harrow. But today we turn to another player, Silas Crowe, the gamekeeper. His boots, I suspect, will tell a tale." They approached the gamekeeper's cottage, a squat stone structure nestled against a copse of yews, its chimney trailing a thin wisp of smoke. The door was ajar, and a faint scent of gun oil and damp wool drifted out. Silas Crowe emerged before Poirot could knock a bear of a man with a grizzled beard and eyes like flint. His tweed jacket was patched, his boots caked with mud that gleamed suspiciously fresh in the pale light. "Mr. Poirot," Silas growled, his voice rough as gravel. "Hergy was poking about. What's a city gent want with me?" Poirot's smile was disarming, yet his gaze pierced like a needle. "Bonjour, Monsieur Crowe. You were patrolling the woods the night Lord Vane vanished. Nest, C, Pa, 3:13 a.m., when a scream was heard and a clock stopped. I wish to hear your account." Silas leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. I was in the woods, checking traps, miles from the hall. Didn't hear no scream." "You're barking up the wrong tree." Hastings frowned, sensing the man's defensiveness miles away. "Convenient, don't you think, Poirot?" "Convenient, oui," Poirot said, stepping closer, his eyes fixed on Silas's boots. "But the mud, Monsieur Crowe, is curious. The garden beneath Lord Vane's study window has a particular clay, reddish and rare. Your boots, they wear this clay. How do you explain this, if you were so far from the hall?" Silas's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching beneath his beard. "Clay's clay. It's everywhere in these parts." Nah, Poirot said, wagging a gloved finger. "Clay is not clay. Sit, like a signature. In your alibi, it is as shaky as this fog. Permit me to see your cottage. Perhaps it holds answers." Silas hesitated, his eyes darting to the woods, but he stepped aside. The cottage was spartan oak table, iron stove, a rack of hunting rifles. On a shelf sat a rustic key, its bow engraved with a faint serpent motif. Poirot's fingers hovered over it, not touching. "It's interesting," he murmured. "This key, Monsieur Crowe, what does it unlock?" Silas shrugged, too quickly. "Old shed out back. Nothing special." Nest, Poirot said, softly. "Nothing is nothing. We shall see this shed." The shed was a crumbling structure, half swallowed by ivy, its door secured by a padlock that matched the rusted key. Inside, the air was thick with dust and a tank of metal. A wooden crate held tools, but beneath a tarp, Poirot found a rolled parchment map of Grimstone Vale, its lines faded but clear. Red ink marked a path from the hall to a spot labeled Chapel Ruins with a cryptic note: "Serpent's coil, midnight, Mon." Juio whispered, unrolling the map fully. "A map, Hastings, and a meeting place. This is no coincidence." Hastings peered over his shoulder. Chapel Ruins. Sounds ominous. Attained. Could it be where Vane was taken? Or where he went willingly? Poirot said, folding the map with care. "Monsieur Crowe, you claim to be in the woods, yet your boots place you in the garden, And this map suggests a secret rendezvous. Your alibi, it crumbles. Silas's face darkened, but he held his tongue. Poirot's gaze swept the shed, landing on a pair of gloves rough leather, not the delicate fabric of the blood-stained one from the garden. "These gloves, they are yours?" he asked. "Aye," Silas said gruffly, "for handling traps." "What of it, Reen?" "For now," Poirot said, but his mind noted the difference. The blood-stained glove was not Silas's, narrowing the field. The gamekeeper was lying, but not, perhaps, about everything. They returned to the hall where Mrs. Elspeth, the housekeeper, met them in the foyer, her gray shawl clutched tightly. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "there's trouble in the village. Fire small. Thank heaven at the blacksmith's. They're saying it's arson." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Arson, terracent. And when did this fire occur?" "Last night," she said, "around midnight." The blacksmith saw a shadow fleeing, but the fog hid the face. Hastings shivered. Midnight again, like the map's note. "This is getting sinister, Poirot." "Oui," Poirot said, his mind racing. A fire, a shadow, a map. The serpent's coiled tightens. We must visit this blacksmith. The village was a cluster of stone cottages, their chimneys dwarfed by the fog. The blacksmith's forge was scorched but intact. Its owner, a burly man named Tompkins, wiping soot from his hands. "Didn't see much," he growled. "Just a figure, cloaked, running toward the chapel ruins. Thought it was kids, till I smelled petrol." "Petrol." Poirot's voice sharpened. "A deliberate act, then. And the chapel ruins, you know them." Tompkins nodded. "Old place, half crumbled. Folks say it's cursed, tied to the Vane family." "I don't hold with such talk, but it's a queer spot." Poirot thanked him, his mind linking the map's mark to the fire. Back at the hall, he confronted Silas again, this time in the library, where Lady Vane's portrait loomed, her veiled eyes seeming to follow them. "Monsieur Poirot said, holding up the map, this points to the chapel ruins, where a shadow was seen last night. You were not in the woods, nor merely in the garden. You were near the hall, and perhaps beyond. Speak, or the truth will speak for you." Silas's shoulders slumped, a rare crack in his gruff facade. "All right," he muttered. "I wasn't in the woods all night. I heard something footsteps near the hall. Went to check. I saw nothing but fog. Didn't want to stir trouble, so I kept quiet." Poirot's smile was thin. "Mercy for the truth, belated though it is. Your alibi is false, but your role in this drama, I think it is not the lead. You are dismissed, for now." As Silas retreated, Hastings whispered, "He's hiding something, Poirot. That map is too convenient," Poirot said, tucking the map into his pocket. "But he is not our serpent. The mud, the key, the map, they confirm he was near the crime. But the glove, the blood, they point elsewhere. The chapel ruins call, Hastings. Tomorrow we shall answer." Chapter 5. The poisoned chalice. The fog over Grimstone Vale swirled like a restless spectre, its chill seeping through the ancient stones of Grimstone Hall. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand dining room, his compact figure a beacon of order amidst the chaos of suspicion. His patent leather shoes gleamed against the polished oak floor, and his mustache, waxed to razor-sharp precision, seemed to quiver with the weight of the mystery. The blood-stained glove, the stopped clock at 3:13 a.m., the hidden safe, the ledger's serpent's coil, the torn photograph of a scarred man, and the cryptic map to the chapel ruins formed a labyrinth of clues, each turn leading deeper into the enigma of Lord Reginald Vane's disappearance. Now a new shadow loomed, an invitation to a village banquet, where secrets might spill as freely as wine. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by a tall window, peering into the fog with a furrowed brow. "Poirot," he said, his voice tinged with unease. "This banquet feels like a trap. After that arson at the blacksmith's and Silas's dodgy alibi, I don't trust anyone in this vale." "Mon ami Poirot," replied, his voice smooth as polished glass. "A trap, perhaps, but also an opportunity. In a room full of wine and words, the tongue grows loose, and the truth, it slips through the cracks. Tonight, we observe when we listen." The dining room was a cavern of opulence, its long mahogany table set with crystal goblets and silver candelabras, their flames casting flickering shadows on the damask walls. The banquet was a village affair, hosted by Lady Vane to quell rumors of her husband's fate, but the air crackled with tension. Guests, local gentry, merchants, and clergy mingled uneasily, their smiles as brittle as the china. Lady Vane presided at the table's head, her black veil replaced by a silver tiara, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. Clara, the ward, sat quietly, her auburn hair catching the candlelight, her fingers twisting a napkin. Silas Crow lurked near the door, his grizzled face set in a scowl, while Mrs. Elspeth, the housekeeper, spies the servants with nervous glances. Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting every detail: the clink of glasses, the murmur of forced pleasantries, the faint scent of lavender from Lady Vane's perfume. At the table's center sat the vicar, Mr. Thurston, a wiry man with a pinched face, his hands clasped as if in prayer. Beside him was Mr. Cedric Harrow, the banker named in Vane's ledger, his sleek suit and oiled hair a contrast to the vale's rustic charm. His smile was too smooth, his eyes too watchful. "Mr. Poirot," Lady Vane said, rising with a rustle of silk, "you honor us with your presence. I trust you find our village diverting." Poirot bowed, his smile a delicate weapon. "Madame, your hospitality is as generous as it is timely. A banquet brings together all players in our little drama. Ness, C.P. I am most curious to meet Mr. Harrow, whose name appears in your husband's papers." Harrow's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. "A detective's curiosity, eh? Lord Vane and I had business dealings, investments, nothing more." "His disappearance is a tragedy," Poirot said, his eyes glinting. "A tragedy, or perhaps a strategy. Tell me, Monsieur Harrow, what is the serpent's coil?" A hush fell over the table. Harrow's fingers tightened on his goblet, and Lady Vane's tiara gleamed as she tilted her head. "A myth," Harrow said smoothly. "Old tales of family curses. Surely you don't believe such nonsense." Before Poirot could reply, a gasp broke the silence. The vicar, Mr. Thurston, clutched his throat, his face contorting as his goblet clattered to the table, spilling red wine like blood. He collapsed, choking, as guests surged to their feet. Hastings leapt forward, loosening the vicar's collar, while Poirot's eyes darted to the goblet, catching a faint cater scent beneath the wine's bouquet. "Vite!" Poirot barked. "Do not touch the glass. It is poisoned." The room erupted in chaos shouts, overturned chairs, a servant's scream. Poirot knelt beside the vicar, his handkerchief pressed to his nose, sniffing the goblet's rim. "Mon dear," he murmured. "Cyanide, subtle but unmistakable. Hastings, fetch water quickly." As Hastings obeyed, Poirot's mind raced. The vicar was breathing, barely, his pulse weak but present. The poison's dose was small, meant to incapacitate, not kill, at least, not yet. Poirot's gaze swept the table, landing on a monogrammed napkin beside Harrow's plate, its initials CH embroidered in gold thread. A servant, trembling, admitted, refilling the vicar's goblet from a shared decanter. But Poirot's eyes lingered on Harrow's hands, which had hovered near the glass moments before intercescent. Poirot said softly, rising, "The poison. was not in the decanter, was in the goblet, applied with precision. A sleight of hand, nest, C.P.A. Monsieur Harrow, you are adept with your hands, I think. Harrow's face paled, but he laughed. Preposterous. I'm no conjurer, Poirot Nan, Poirot said, his voice a velvet trap. Yet the napkin, it bears your initials, and your seat is closest to the vicar's. We shall see. The vicar was carried to a guest room, tended by a village doctor, summoned in haste. Poirot, undeterred, gathered the guests in the drawing room, where the fog pressed against the windows like a silent witness. He paced, his small frame radiating authority, as he questioned the servants. One, a young maid named Bess, K., admitted to seeing Harrow fiddle with something under the table, a small vial, perhaps quickly pocketed. Merci, mademoiselle, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. And this vial did, it gleam like glass. Bess nodded, her hands shaking. Yes, sir. Small, like a perfume bottle. Poirot turned to Harrow, who stood by the fireplace, his composure fraying. Monsieur Harrow, a vial, a napkin, a poisoned chalice. The evidence, it mounts. Qui knew? The vicar had knowledge of Lord Vane's affairs. We? Perhaps he was to speak tonight. Harrow's eyes darted to Lady Vane, who remained statue still. You grasping, Poirot? I've done nothing, Reen, Poirot said, his voice sharp. Psst. Then permit a search of your pockets. Before Harrow could protest, Silas Crowe stepped forward, his bulk blocking the door. Do as he says, Silas growled, surprising Poirot with his cooperation. A search revealed no vial, but Poirot noted a faint stain on Harrow's cuffwine, tinged with a bitter residue. Sacre bleu, Poirot whispered. The poison was applied by touch of sleight of hand, as I suspected. A cloth, dipped in cyanide, wiped on the goblet's rim. The vial, it is discarded, but the stain betrays you, Monsieur Harrow. Harrow bolted for the door, but Silas seized him, pinning his arms. The guests gasped, and Lady Vane's fan snapped shut, her eyes blazing. Enough, she cried. Cedric, you fool. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Come, madame. Monsieur Harrow is implicated, but the serpent's coil is not yet unraveled. The vicar lives, and he will speak. For now, we know the poison was a trick, meant to silence a witness. Monsieur Harrow, your motive is clear, but your master, if you have one, remains hidden. Chapter 6. The crypt beneath the chapel, the fog over Grimstone Vale clung like a conspirator's whisper, weaving through the skeletal branches of ancient yews, enshrouding the distant silhouette of the chapel ruins. Hercule Poirot stood on the gravel path leading from Grimstone Hall, his overcoat buttoned against the evening's damp chill, his mustache a pair of polished crescents gleaming in the fading light. The blood-stained glove, the stopped clock at 3:13 a.m., the hidden safe, the ledger's serpent's coil, a torn photograph of a scarred man, the cryptic map to the chapel ruins, and the poisoned chalice at the banquet formed a constellation of clues, each pointing to a deeper darkness. Cedric Harrow, detained but unconfessed, was a thread in the tapestry. But the true weaver, the serpent, remained elusive. Captain Arthur Hastings trudged beside him, his scarf muffling a grumble. Poirot, this trek to the chapel ruins feels like a wild goose chase. That map from Silas's shed, serpent's coil, midnight, it's dashed, ominous. And after that poisoning business, I'm not keen on dark corners. Mon ami, Poirot replied, his voice a velvet blade slicing through the fog. The dark corners are where the truth hides. The map is no mere scribblet, is a summons to the heart of our enigma. The chapel ruins, they call to Hercule Poirot, and we shall answer. The path wound through a copse of gnarled trees, their roots clawing at the earth like desperate hands. The chapel ruins loomed ahead, a crumbling relic of stone and ivy, its arched windows gaping like empty eyes. The air carried a faint tank of moss and something sharper charred wood. Perhaps from the recent arson at the blacksmith's. Poirot's flashlight cut through the mist, illuminating a weathered door half hidden by brambles. The map's red ink had marked the spot, K, and the serpent motif etched into the door's lintel confirmed its significance. Interesting, Poirot murmured, tracing the carving with a gloved finger. The serpent again. This is no coincidence. Hastings. He pushed the door, which creaked open with a groan, revealing a stone staircase descending into darkness. The air was cold and heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient decay. Hastings hesitated, his hand on his revolver. Looks like a crypt, Poirot. Are you sure about this? Certainment, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming with resolve. The crypt beneath the chapel holds secrets, and secrets they did not hide from Hercule Poirot. The staircase spiraled downward, its steps slick with moisture. At the bottom, a cavernous chamber opened, its walls lined with stone sarcophagi, their lids carved with faded crests. A single oil lamp, left burning by an unknown hand, cast flickering shadows that danced like specters. In the center stood a wooden table, strewn with dusty ledgers and parchment rolls, their pages yellowed but intact. Poirot's heart quickened. These were no ordinary records. He approached the table, his flashlight illuminating a ledger marked with the Vane family crest. Its entries detailed land transactions dated decades apart, each signed with initials R.V., L.V., C. H. Lord Vane, Lady Vane, and, presumably, Cedric Harrow. One entry, circled in faded ink, read, Serpent's Coil, £100,000, transferred to C.H., 1918. Another, more recent, noted a payment to an unnamed party, marked only with a serpent symbol. Mon Dieu, Poirot whispered, his fingers tracing. The text, a financial conspiracy, spanning years, land deals, illicit perhaps, tied to this serpent's coil. And Harrow, he is no mere banker, he is a linchpin. Hastings peered over his shoulder, his face pale in the lamplight. Land deals, could Vane have been killed to hide this, or to protect it? Poirot said, his mind racing. But there is more. Look beneath the ledger. He lifted the book, revealing a coded letter, its script a jumble of numbers and symbols. At the bottom, a signature, the serpent. The letter's content was cryptic, but one phrase stood out. Midnight, chapel crypt, payment due. The date was recent, 3 days before Vane's disappearance. Sacre bleu, Poirot said, folding the letter with care. A meeting planned. Here, in this very crypt. But who met whom, and why? Before Hastings could respond, a low groan echoed through the chamber. Poirot's flashlights swung toward the sound, revealing a trapdoor in the floor, its edges barely visible. He knelt, probing the rusted hinges, when a sharp crack split the air. The trapdoor gave way, plunging Poirot downward into a narrow shaft. Hastings shouted, lunging to grab him, but Poirot's quick reflexes caught a jutting stone, halting his fall. Feet, Hastings. Poirot gasped, his voice strained. The rope, your scarf. Hastings tore off his scarf, tossing it down. With effort, Poirot climbed back, his face flushed but composed. Merci, he panted, brushing dust from his coat. A trap, n'est-ce pas, sabotaged, to silence intruders. Someone knew we would come. Hastings helped him to his feet, his eyes wide. Sabotaged? By whom? Harrow's locked up. But the serpent has many coils, Poirot said, his gaze sweeping the crypt. This trapdoor, it leads somewhere, perhaps an escape route. But for now, we have the letter. Is enough. They emerged from the crypt, the fog thicker now, the chapel ruins looming like a forgotten sentinel. Poirot clutched the coded letter, its words a beacon in the mystery. The chamber's ledgers confirmed a financial scheme. The letter, a secret meeting, and the trap, a deadly warning. The chapter closed with Poirot's escape, satisfying resolution that secured a vital clue while raising new questions: who set the trap, and what payment was due at midnight. Chapter 7. The Mill's Midnight Whispers. The fog over Grimstone Vale coiled like a serpent's breath, its damp tendrils slithering through the skeletal remains of the old mill. A derelict structure perched on the vale's edge, where the river murmured secrets to the night. Hercule Poirot crouched behind a crumbling stone wall, his overcoat blending with the shadows, his mustache a pair of polished sabers glinting faintly in the moonlight, its blood-stained glove, the stopped clock at 3:13 a.m., the hidden safe, the ledger's serpent's coil, the torn photograph of a scarred man, the cryptic map to the chapel ruins, the poisoned chalice. And the coded letter from the crypt formed a tapestry of menace, each thread pulling him closer to the heart of Lord Reginald Vane's disappearance. The letter's words: midnight, chapel crypt, payment due at, led him here, to the mill, where the map's red ink hinted at a clandestine rendezvous. Captain Arthur Hastings crouched beside him, his breath clouding in the chill, his revolver a cold weight in his hand. "Poirot," he whispered, his voice taut, "this mill gives me the creeps. That letter midnight, payment due, it's like we're walking into the serpent's lair." "Mon ami Poirot," replied, his voice a velvet whisper cutting through. "The fog, the lair, is where the serpent reveals itself. The crypt gave us a clue, but the millet is a stage for our next act. We listen, we watch, and the truth, it will speak." The mill loomed ahead, its broken wheel creaking in the wind, its timbers blackened by time and neglect. The river's low gurgle mingled with the rustle of leaves, creating a symphony of unease. Poirot's flashlight was off, his eyes adjusting to the dim glow of a lantern flickering inside the mill's shattered window. His quoted letter had pointed to a meeting, and the map's mark on the mill confirmed it as the next link in the chain. He signaled Hastings to stay low, his gloved hand steady as they crept closer. Using a tangle of brambles for cover, a faint murmur drifted from the mill voices, low and urgent. Poirot's ears strained, catching fragments. "Final payment. Vane's gone. No loose ends." The words were sharp, edged with menace, and one voice was unmistakable: the clipped, pious tone of Mr. Thurston, the vicar, who had narrowly escaped the poison chalice at the banquet. "Soccer blue," Poirot breathed, his eyes narrowing. "The vicar, here, at midnight. His survival was no accident. Hastings, he is no victim, he is a player." Hastings gripped his revolver tighter. "The vicar, but he nearly died." "Why would he be here, plotting Perquoy?" Poirot murmured. "That is the question. Perhaps the poison was a ruse to deflect suspicion, or perhaps he knows more than he is told. We must hear more." They edged closer, the mill's shadow swallowing them. Through a gap in the rotting boards, Poirot glimpsed two cloaked figures inside, their faces obscured by hoods. One was tall and wiry Thurston by his posture, while the other was shorter, their movements nervous, a lantern on a crate cast, their shadows distorted and serpentine across the mildewed walls. The shorter figure gestured sharply, their voice a hiss. The ledger's safe, but Poirot's sniffing too close. "We need him gone." Thurston's voice was calm, almost soothing. "Patience. The serpent's coil protects its own. The payments ready midnight, tomorrow, at the crypt. No mistakes." Poirot's heart quickened, his little gray cells racing. The crypt again, another meeting, and the serpent's coil, a code, a cabal, a conspiracy. He leaned closer, but a twig snapped under Hastings's boot, the sound like a gunshot in the silence. The figures froze, their lanterns snuffed out, plunging the mill into darkness. "Vite," Poirot hissed, pulling Hastings back. A moment later, a real gunshot cracked, the bullet splintering the wood above their heads. The figures bolted, their cloaks vanishing into the fog. Poirot dove behind a rusted millstone, dragging Hastings with him, his mind already cataloging the scene. The shot had come from the mill's upper level, suggesting a third conspirator lookout, perhaps. "Stay down," Poirot whispered, his flashlight sweeping the ground. Near the mill's base, glinting in the mud, was a brass bullet casing, still warm. He retrieved it with a handkerchief, his eyes scanning the fog for movement. The figures were gone, swallowed by the night, but the casing was a prized tangible, linked to the unseen shooter. Hastings panted, his face pale. That was too close, Poirot. Who were they? And the vicar what's he playing at? "Come, mon ami," Poirot said, pocketing the casing. The vicar is no saint, it seems. His voice betrays him. In this casing it will tell its own story. For the meeting tomorrow at the cryptad is our next step. They retreated to Grimstone Hall, the fog a silent accomplice to their escape. In the library, Poirot examined the bullet casing under a magnifying glass, its surface etched with a faint maker's mark, a serpent coiled around a cross. "Interesting," he murmured. "A custom piece, perhaps." The serpent's coil is not just a name, it's a signature. The next morning, Poirot summoned Mrs. Elspeth, the housekeeper, to the library, where Lady Vane's portrait loomed, its veiled eyes seeming to judge. "Madame," he said, his tone gentle but probing, "you spoke of a scream at 3:13, the night Lord Vane vanished. Have you heard other sounds, perhaps voices, at midnight, near the mill?" Mrs. Elspeth's hands twisted her shawl, her eyes darting to the window. "Not the mill, sir, but the chapel. Last week I heard whispers late at night. Thought it was ghosts, but it was men's voices, low and angry. I didn't dare look," Hercule Poirot said, his mind linking her words to the crypt's letter. "Crete. And the vicar, does he visit the chapel often?" She nodded, hesitant, more than most. "Says it's for prayer, but he carries a satchel, heavy like." "I never asked." Poirot dismissed her, turning to Hastings. "The vicar, he is no mere bystander. His voice at the mill, his visits to the chapel, he is entangled in this coil. We must question him, but carefully." They found Mr. Thurston in the village church, polishing a brass lectern, his pinched face serene but his eyes wary. "Mr. Poirot," he said, setting down his cloth, "you're persistent. I trust the banquet's unpleasantness hasn't soured your visit." "Nan," Monsieur Poirot said, his smile a velvet trap. "But the mill, last night it was most illuminating. Voices, speaking of payments and serpents. One voice, I think, was yours." Thurston's hand froze, his composure cracking. "Mill. Preposterous. I was in my vicarage, preparing my sermon." "Frame it," Poirot said, producing the bullet casing. "This was found where voices spoke. A serpent's mark. Ness, C.P. And your satchel. So heavy, when you visit the chapel perhaps, it carries more than prayer books." Thurston's face paled, but he held his ground. "You accuse without proof, Poirot. I am a man of God." "Oui," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "But even men of God may whisper in the dark." "We shall speak again, monsieur." Chapter 8. The Vicar's Confession. The fog over Grimstone Vale hung like a tattered shroud, its gray fingers curling around the spire of the village church, where the bell tolled mournfully in the late morning gloom. Hercule Poirot stood at the churchyard gate, his overcoat a dark silhouette against the mist, his mustache a pair of polished crescents framing a face etched with determination, the blood-stained glove, the stopped clock at 3:13 a.m., the hidden safe, the ledger's serpent's coil, the torn photograph of a scarred man, the cryptic map to the chapel ruins, the poisoned chalice, the coded letter from the crypt, and the vicar's voice in the mill's midnight whispers formed a mosaic of treachery, each piece a step closer to unraveling Lord Reginald Vane's fate. Mr. Thurston of Vica had revealed himself as a conspirator, his pious facade crumbling under the weight of Poirot's scrutiny. Captain Arthur Hastings stood beside him, his scarf muffling a shiver as he eyed the church's shadowed doorway. "Poirot," he said, his voice low, hearing Thurston at the mill was a shock. A vicar plotting at midnight. It's dashed unchristian, but what's he hiding? "Mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice a velvet scalpel slicing through the fog. "The cloth does not shield the heart from deceit." Thurston's voice betrayed him, and today we shall make him speak. The serpent's coil tightens, but Hercule Poirot shall cut it. The church was a cavern of stone and silence, its pews worn smooth by centuries of prayer, its air heavy with the scent of wax and old hymnals. Mr. Thurston stood at the altar, ranging a silver chalice not unlike the one poisoned at the banquet, with hands that trembled faintly. His pinched face turned as Poirot and Hastings entered, his eyes narrowing like a cornered fox. "Mr. Poirot," Thurston said, his voice smooth but strained, "you return to my sanctuary? Have you no respect for sacred ground?" Poirot's smile was polite, but his eyes gleamed like steel. "Monsieur, a sanctuary is only as sacred as the man who tends it. Last night at the mill I heard your voice speaking of payments and Lord Vane's fate. You deny this?" Thurston's fingers tightened on the chalice, his composure fraying. "The mill? Absurd. I was in my vicarage, preparing my sermon. You mistake shadows for substance." "Nan," Poirot said, producing the bullet casing from his pocket, its serpentine cross mark glinting in the candlelight. "This was found where you spoke, monsieur, and your satchel, so heavy when you visit the chapel does it carry sermons or secrets?" Thurston's face paled, his lips parting as if to protest, but Poirot pressed on, his voice relentless. "You were no victim at the banquet. The poison, it was a diversion, n'est-ce pas, to make you seem innocent, but the serpent's coil binds you, and I shall know why." The vicar's shoulders slumped, a crack in his pious armor. "You're relentless, Poirot," he muttered, sinking onto a pew. "Very well. I was at the mill not to plot, but to listen. I heard things about Lord Vane, an argument that night. At 3:13, a stranger, not from the Vale, shouting about a will. I didn't see his face, but I heard Vane's voice, angry, desperate." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A will? And you kept this silent?" Perquat Steen's hands twisted together, his voice barely a whisper. "Because I was blackmailed. A note slipped under my door, warning me to stay quiet or face ruin. It mentioned my past debt, long buried. I swear I meant no harm." "Monsieur," Poirot said softly, his mind racing. "A blackmail note and a will. Where's this note, monsieur?" Thurston hesitated, then led them to the vicarage, a modest cottage behind the church, its garden overgrown with nettles. A cluttered study. He retrieved a locked box from a desk drawer, his hands shaking as he opened it. Inside was a single sheet, its ink stark. "Silence, or your debts are known. The serpent watches." No signature, but the serpent motif echoed the ledger, the locket, the bullet casing interested. Poirot murmured, examining the note with his magnifying glass. "This paper, it is fine, not common. And the ink fresh, no more than a week old. You have seen the stranger since, n'est-ce pas?" Thurston shook his head, but his eyes darted to the garden. Poirot followed his gaze, stepping outside to the muddy path. There, half buried under a rosebush, was a fragment of burned paper, its edges charred but legible. "Will forged. Heir unknown. Vane." The handwriting matched the ledger's cryptic entries. Soccer blue, Poirot whispered, retrieving the fragment with a handkerchief. A will forged, and an heir. The serpent's coil is a legacy. Hastings, twisted by greed. Hastings frowned, clutching his hat against the wind. Forged. Sylvain was killed to hide a fake will. But who's the heir? That, Poirot said, tucking the fragment away, is what we must learn. Monsieur Thurston, your silence has aided a crime. You will come with us to the hall, where justice awaits. Thurston's face crumpled, but he nodded, his defiance spent. Grimstone Hall. Poirot summoned the local constable, stout man named Brant, who listened grimly as Poirot outlined the vicar's role, his presence at the mill, his knowledge of the argument, his concealment of the blackmail note. Monsieur Thurston is not the serpent, Poirot concluded, but he has coiled himself in lies. Arrest him for withholding evidence. Si vous plot. As Brant led Thurston away, Lady Vane appeared in the foyer, her silver tiara glinting like a crown of thorns. You accuse a man of God, Poirot, she said, her voice icy. What next, my ward? My staff? Madame Poirot replied, his tone unyielding. I accuse only where evidence points. The will, the heir, the serpent, they circle your house. If you know more, speak now. Our eyes flashed, but she turned away, her silence louder than words. Clara, watching from the staircase, clutched the banister, her face pale. Poirot noted her fear, a silent promise of secrets yet to be uncovered. Chapter 9. The airs masquerade. The fog over Grimstone Vale shimmered like a silver veil, its ethereal tendrils weaving through the Gothic spires of Grimstone Hall, where the chandeliers blazed with 1,000 candles, casting a golden glow over the masked ball. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the ballroom, his compact figure immaculate in a tailored black suit. His mustache, a pair of polished sabers, framing a face alight with calculation. The blood-stained glove, the stopped clock at 3:13 a.m., the hidden safe, the ledger's serpent's coil, the torn photograph of a scarred man, the cryptic map, the poisoned chalice, the coded letter, key, the vicar's confession, and the forged will formed a labyrinth of deceit, each turn leading closer to the heart of Lord Reginald Vane's disappearance. Tonight, the masquerade grand affair, hosted by Lady Vane, to quell village whispers, promised to unmask more than faces. Captain Arthur Hastings stood beside him, his domino mask askew, his eyes wide as he surveyed the swirling dancers in their feathered masks and silk gowns. Poirot, he whispered, adjusting his cape, this ball feels like a stage for mischief. After Thurston's arrest in that forged will business, I'm half expecting another poison plot. Mon ami, Poirot replied, his voice a velvet whisper slicing through the music's lilt. A masquerade hides faces, but reveals motives. The vicar spoke of a will and an heir, and tonight, among these masks, the serpent's coil may show its face. We watch, we listen, and the truth it dances. The ballroom was a spectacle of opulence, its marble floor gleaming under crystal chandeliers, its walls draped with crimson velvet that seemed to pulse in the candlelight. Guests twirled in a waltz, their masks, cells, foxes, serpents, glinting with menace and mirth. Lady Vane presided from a raised dais, her silver mask adorned with onyx gems, her black gown flowing like liquid shadow. Clara, the ward, moved among the dancers, her emerald mask accentuating her auburn hair, her movements graceful but tense, as if she sensed unseen eyes. Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting every detail, the clink of champagne flutes, the rustle of silk, the faint scent of jasmine from a passing guest. His eyes lingered on Clara, whose mask did not hide the scar on her wrist, a faint, crescent-shaped mark, identical to the scarred man in the torn photograph. Interesting, he murmured, his little gray cells humming. The scar, it is no coincidence. Clara, she is more than a ward. Before he could approach her, a commotion broke the music's rhythm. A guest in a serpent mask stumbled, dropping a silver locket that skittered across the floor. Poirot swooped down, retrieving it with a gloved hand. Its surface bore the vain crest, and inside was a miniature of Clara, her face younger but unmistakable. The locket's clasp was loose, as if dropped in haste. "Monsieur," Poirot whispered, slipping the locket into his pocket. "A clue, Hastings. This locket links Clara to the vain legacy and, perhaps, to the serpent." Hastings frowned, his mask slipping further. "Clara, but she's just a cousin, isn't she? Why would she have Vane's crest?" "It's just a cousin," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "Or perhaps the heir the vicar spoke of. We must speak with her, but doucement, she is frightened." They followed Clara to a quiet alcove, where she stood by a velvet curtain, her mask half raised, her eyes darting like a trapped bird's. "Mademoiselle Clara," Poirot said gently, "this locket. It is yours, n'est-ce pas? The scar on your wrist, it matches the man in a photograph found torn in the fire. Who is he to you?" Clara's hand flew to her wrist, her voice a whisper. I don't know what you mean, Mr. Poirot. The locket, an old keepsake. The scar, an accident from childhood." "An accident," Poirot's tone was soft but unyielding, "or a mark of lineage. The will forged, named an heir. You, mademoiselle, are more than you seem." Before Clara could respond, a masked figure, a tall man in a raven mask, brushed past, his hand grazing her arm. She gasped, fleeing into the crowd, the locket's chain catching on her gown and falling again. Poirot retrieved it, noting a tiny inscription inside, "To see, from R.V. blood of the serpent." His heart quickened. The initials confirmed Clara as the heir, but the serpent's reference hinted at danger. "Sacre bleu," Poirot said, his mind racing. "Clara is the heir, Hastings, but manipulated, perhaps, by the serpent's coil. We must find her." The ball grew frenzied, the music a feverish pulse. Poirot and Hastings wove through the dancers, searching for Clara's emerald mask. They found her near a side door, slipping into a darkened corridor. Poirot followed, his flashlight cutting through the gloom, revealing a narrow staircase descending to a locked room. Clara, startled, turned, her mask falling to reveal tear-streaked cheeks. "Mr. Poirot," she choked, "I didn't want this. The locket was my mother's. She was cast out by the Vanes. I'm their shame, their secret heir. But I don't know who threatens me." Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice was firm. "Mademoiselle, you are in danger, but you are not alone. It's the locket, the will. They point to you, but also to the serpent. Tell me, who gave you that locket?" Clara hesitated, then whispered, "Lady Vane. She said it was my birthright, but I think she fears me." Before Poirot could press further, a shadow moved at the corridor's end, a figure in a serpent mask, clutching a letter. Poirot lunged, but the figure vanished through a hidden panel, leaving the letter behind. It was sealed with a serpent's wax stamp, its contents a single line. "The heir must fall, or the coil unravels." "Mon Dieu," Poirot said, pocketing the letter. "A threat, Hastings, and a confirmation. Clara is the heir, but the serpent seeks to silence her." They escorted Clara back to the ballroom, where Lady Vane's eyes followed them from her dais, her silver mask a cold facade. Poirot confronted her, his voice low but piercing. "Madame, you gave Clara the locket, knowing her lineage. The will, forged, names her heir. Why hide this?" Lady Vane's fan snapped shut, her voice icy. "You meddle in family matters, Poirot. Clara is a ward, nothing more. The locket was a gift, not a confession." "Raymond," Poirot said, holding up the letter, "this suggests otherwise." "The serpent threatens your heir, madame. Speak, or the truth will." Chapter 10. The smuggler's tunnel. The fog over Grimstone Vale draped the landscape like a conspirator's cloak, its chilled tendrils slithering through the gnarled roots of ancient willows along the riverbank. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of a crumbling stone bridge, his overcoat a dark silhouette against the twilight. His mustache, a pair of polished sabers gleaming faintly in the lantern's glow. The blood-stained glove, the stopped clock at 3:13 a.m., the hidden safe, the ledger's serpent's coil. The torn photograph of a scarred man, the cryptic map, the poisoned chalice, the coded letter, the vicar's confession, and Clara's identity as the secret vein heir formed a tapestry of treachery, each thread pulling him deeper into the enigma of Lord Reginald Vane's disappearance. The threatening letter from the masked ball, warning that the heir must fall, had led Poirot to suspect a hidden, besieged smuggler's tunnel, whispered of in village lore, linking the hall to the river. Captain Arthur Hastings stood beside him, his boots sinking into the muddy bank, his face etched with unease as he gripped a lantern. "Poirot," he whispered, his breath clouding in the damp air. "This tunnel business sounds like something out of a penny dreadful. After Clara's revelation and that serpent letter, I'm not keen on crawling through some dank passage. Right, mind?" "Me," Poirot replied, his voice a velvet blade cutting through the fog. "The dank passages are where the serpent hides. The letter threatens Clara, the heir, and the ledger speaks of wealth, perhaps smuggled. The tunnel, it is the next step in our dance with the truth." The riverbank was a maze of reeds and shadows, the water's low murmur mingling with the wind's mournful sigh. Poirot's flashlight swept the ground, landing on a moss-covered crate half hidden by brambles, its iron bars etched with a faint serpent motif. The map from Silas's shed had marked a path from the chapel to the river, and village tales spoke of a smuggler's tunnel used by the Vanes centuries ago to move illicit goods. Poirot pried the grate open, revealing a stone staircase descending into darkness, its air thick with the scent of mildew and earth iridescent. Poirot murmured, his gloved hand tracing the serpent carving. "The coil, it leads us underground, along why Hastings." The tunnel was a claustrophobic vein of stone, its walls slick with moisture, its ceiling low enough to force Poirot to stoop. Hastings followed, his lantern casting flickering shadows that danced like specters. The passage sloped downward, branching into a wider chamber where crates were stacked against the walls, their wood splintered but new. Poirot's heart quickened as he opened one, revealing a jade statuette serpent coiled around a globe, its eyes glinting with inlaid emeralds. "Monsieur," Poirot whispered, lifting the artifact with care. "Smuggled treasure, Hastings. Not mere trinkets, but antiquities worth a fortune." "The serpent's coil is a smuggling ring." Hastings's eyes widened. "Smuggling? So Vane wasn't just hiding money, he was moving stolen goods. But why kill him, pourquoi?" Poirot said, his mind racing. Perhaps he wished to stop, or to betray his partners. "Look here, in the crate." He pulled out a small ledger, its pages coded in a cipher, matching the crypt's letter. The entries listed shipments jade, ivory, gold sent, 2 ports in Lisbon and Cairo, each signed with initials R.V.C.H. E. Villord, Vane, Cedric Harrow, and, shockingly, Lady Eleanor Vane. A final entry, dated the night of Vane's disappearance. Read, "Serpent shipment halted. EV to secure air." "Soccer blue," Poirot said, his voice low. "Lady Vane, she is no bystander. She is part of the coil, protecting Clara, controlling her." Before Hastings could respond, a faint scrape echoed from the tunnel's far end. Poirot's flashlight swung toward the sound, catching a glint of metal or tripwire strung across the passage, linked to a hidden mechanism. He froze, his hand halting Hastings. "Attention, trap, like the crypt." serpent guards its lair. With delicate precision, Poirot stepped over the wire, his flashlight revealing a narrow alcove. There, on a stone ledge, lay a sealed letter, its wax stamp bearing the serpent's mark. He broke it open, revealing a single page. E.V. to deliver. Heir to Lisbon. Serpent's debt cleared. The handwriting matched Lady Vane's elegant script from a note Poirot had seen in the study. Montia, Poirot said, pocketing the letter. Lady Vane plans to move Clara, perhaps to silence her claim. The smuggling, the will, the heirate is all connected. They retraced their steps, emerging into the fog as the river whispered behind them. Back at Grimstone Hall, Poirot confronted Lady Vane in her private parlor, a room of gilt mirrors and rosewood, where her silver tiara gleamed like a crown of thorns. Clara stood nearby, her emerald eyes wide with fear, her scar hidden beneath a lace sleeve. "Madame," Poirot said, his voice a velvet trap. "The tunnel beneath the river speaks of smuggling jade gold, the serpent's wealth. Your initials, EVR, in the ledger. And this letter," he held up the sealed note, "betrays your plan to deliver Clara, the heir, to Lisbon." "Why?" Lady Vane's fan snapped shut, her face a mask of icy control. "You overstep, Poirot. Smuggling. Absurd. Clara is my ward, not a pawn." "Frame it," Poirot said, producing the jade statuette. "This was found in your tunnel, madame, and the letter, in your hand, speaks of debts and heirs. You are the serpent's coil, or its puppet." Clara gasped, stepping back, her voice trembling. "Aunt Eleanor, is this true? Did you use me?" Lady Vane's eyes flashed, but her voice softened. "Clara, you don't understand. The Vanes are cursed. Debts, secrets. I protected you." "Protected," Poirot said, his tone unyielding, "or controlled to secure your smuggling empire. The ledger is decoded, madame. It names you, Harrow and Vane. The serpent's coil is a ring, and you are its heart." Lady Vane's composure cracked, her hands trembling. "You have no proof, Poirot. Arrest me, and the veil will burn." Poirot's smile was thin. "None, madame. The proof is in the tunnel, the ledger, the letter. You are implicated, but the serpent's head remains hidden. For now, I watch." The chapter closed with the decoded ledger revealing Lady Vane's. Chapter 11. The Serpent's End. Came the fog over Grimstone Vale, hung like a traitor's shroud, its gray tendrils curling around the ancient stones of the Vane family mausoleum. A grim monument nestled in a hollow beyond the hall. Hercule Poirot stood at its iron gate, his overcoat a dark silhouette against the twilight, his mustache a pair of polished sabers gleaming faintly in the lantern's glow. The blood-stained glove, the stopped clock at 3:13 a.m., the hidden safe, the ledgers, serpent's coil, the torn photograph of a scarred man, the cryptic map, the poisoned chalice, the coded letter, the vicar's confession, Clara's airship, then the smuggler's tunnel ledger formed a tapestry of treachery. Each thread converging here, at the mausoleum, where the final act of the serpent's coil would unfold. The threatening letter from the masked ball and the tunnel's coded ledger had pointed to a last midnight meeting. And Poirot's little gray cells were poised to unmask the serpent's master. Captain Arthur Hastings stood beside him, his lantern casting jittery shadows, his face etched with tension as he gripped his revolver. "Poirot," he whispered, his breath clouding in the chill. "This mausoleum feels like a tomb for the living. After Lady Vane's smuggling and Clara's airship, I'm half expecting a ghost to settle this." "Mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice a velvet blade slicing through the fog. "Ghosts are but shadows of the past, and it is the living who cast them. The serpent's coil ends tonight, here where secrets are buried. We shall unmask the master." The mausoleum was a fortress of weathered stone, its iron gate creaking on rusted hinges, its interior a maze of marble slabs and shadowed niches. The air was heavy with the scent of damp stone and wilted roses, left by mourners long gone. Faint light flickered from within, guiding Poirot and Hastings to a central chamber where a stone sarcophagus bore the Vane crest, its serpent motif glinting ominously. On a marble plinth lay a concealed dagger, its blade etched with a coiled snake, its handle worn but sharp iridescent. Poirot murmured, examining the dagger without touching it. A weapon, hidden here, where none should be. The serpent prepares for its strike. Before Hastings could respond, a low murmur echoed from a side passage, voices, sharp and urgent. Poirot signaled silence. His flashlight dimmed as they crept toward the sound. Through a cracked stone arch, they glimpsed 3 figures. Lady Vane, her silver tiara replaced by a dark cloak. Clara, her emerald eyes wide with fear. And a tall man, his face scarred the man from the torn photograph, his presence chillingly familiar. His voice was low, commanding. The deed is forged, Eleanor. Clara's claim ends tonight, or the coil collapses. Lady Vane's voice was a hiss. You promised me power, Gideon, not murder. Clara's my ward, she must live. Clara's voice trembled. You lied to me and Eleanor. I'm no Aramay pawn. Poirot's heart quickened, his little gray cells aligning the clues. Gideon, the scarred man, was the serpent's head, orchestrating the smuggling, the will, the threats. He stepped forward, his voice ringing through the chamber. Messieurs, et madame, the masquerade is over. Gideon Vane, the disgraced brother of Lord Reginald, I presume, the serpent's coil is your creation. The figures froze, Gideon's scarred face twisting in fury. Poirot, he snarled, drawing a revolver. You meddled too far. Nod, Poirot said, his tone unyielding. The glove, stained with your brother's blood. The clock, stopped to mark his murder. The ledger, detailing your smuggling. The photograph, torn to hide your face. The letter, threatening Clara. The tunnel. Your Laurel point to you. You forged a deed to steal Clara's inheritance. Nest, ce pas. Gideon laughed, a cold sound. Reginald was weak wanted, out of the coil. I gave him peace, in this very tomb. Clara's next, unless you step back. Wait. Hastings raised his revolver, but Poirot's hand stayed him. Calm, Hastings. Monsieur Gideon, your game is lost. The dagger, it bears your initials GV. The constable waits outside, summoned by my note. Surrender, or the coil binds you. Lady Vane gasped, stepping between them. Gideon, enough. I joined for wealth, not blood. Clara's my niece, I won't let you harm her. Clara's eyes blazed, her fear turning to fury. You used me, both of you. I'm the heir, but I'll burn this legacy before I let it kill me. Gideon lunged, his revolver aimed at Clara, but Poirot was faster, kicking a loose stone that tripped him. The gun fired, the bullet grazing a marble slab as Hastings tackled Gideon, pinning him. Lady Vane sank to her knees, sobbing, her cloak pooling like ink. Clara stood frozen, her scar gleaming in the lantern's light. Poirot retrieved a forged deed from Gideon's coat, its ink matching the tunnel ledger. Mon Dieu, he said, unfolding it. K.D. to transfer Grimstone Vale. To Gideon, cutting Clara out. The serpent's endgame thwarted. As a constable, Brandt stormed in with officers. Gideon was cuffed, his scar a stark brand in a flickering light. Kitty Vane confessed, her role seduced by Gideon's promise of wealth. She hid his return, forging documents to secure the smuggling ring. Lord Vane's body, she admitted, lay in a sealed niche, killed at 3:13 a.m. to silence his withdrawal from the coil. Clara, the true heir, was spared, her claim now secure. Chapter 12. The Vale's redemption. The fog over Grimstone Vale had dissipated. leaving a crisp autumn sky that bathed the rolling hills in golden light, as if the veil itself had shed its burdens. Hercule Poirot stood on a grassy knoll overlooking the village, his overcoat impeccable against the breeze. His mustache, a pair of polished crescents, framing a face alight with quiet satisfaction. The blood-stained glove, the stopped clock at 3:13 a.m., the hidden safe, the ledger's serpent's coil, the torn photograph, the cryptic map, the poisoned chalice, the coded letter, Caba's confession, Clara's airship, the smuggler's tunnel, and Gideon Vane's arrest as the mastermind had unraveled a conspiracy of greed and murder. Yet Poirot's little gray cells sensed a final shadow lingering accomplice, hidden in plain sight, and Clara's resolve to redeem the Vane legacy offered the stage for the last revelation. Captain Arthur Hastings stood beside him, his tweed cap tilted, his eyes scanning the village square below, where preparations for a harvest festival buzzed with life. "Poirot," he said, his voice warm but wary. "Gideon's locked away, Lady Vane's confessed, and Clara's set to sell the estate. The Vale's almost cheerful. But you've got that look something still amiss, isn't it?" "Mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice a velvet cadence over the wind's rustle. "The serpent's coil is cut, but its venom lingers. One accomplice remains, a shadow who aided Gideon's schemes. The festival, it is the perfect stage for their unmasking. Karashi must seal the Vale's redemption." The village square was a tapestry of color, with stalls draped in crimson and gold bunting, their tables laden with apples, cider, and woven baskets. Villagers laughed and danced to a fiddler's tune, their faces free of the fear that had gripped them days before. Clara, now the Vane heir, moved among them, her auburn hair tied with a green ribbon, her scar hidden beneath a velvet glove. She had announced her plan to sell Grimstone Hall, its proceeds to fund schools and farms, breaking the Vane curse. Yet her eyes held a flicker of unease, as she sensed a final threat. Poirot's gaze swept the festival, noting the blacksmith, Tompkins tossing horseshoes, Mrs. Elspeth selling pies, and Silas Crow hauling cider barrels, his gruff demeanor softened by purpose. Among the crowd was a new figure, Mr. Leonard Finch, the village solicitor, a wiry man with spectacles and a nervous smile, who had managed the Vane estate's legal affairs. His presence at every key event, banquet, ball, even the mill nagged at Poirot's memory. "Interesting," Poirot murmured, watching Finch slip a folded paper into his coat. "Monsieur Finch, he is too quiet, too present. A solicitor knows deeds, wills, secrets. We shall test him." They approached Clara at a cider stall, where she poured drinks for children, her smile genuine but strained. "Laissez Clara," Poirot said gently. "Your plan for the Vale, it is noble. But the serpent's coil had many hands. Have you noticed Monsieur Finch, always near, always watching?" Clara's hand paused, cider splashing. "Mr. Finch, tond, he's just the solicitor, handled father's papers. He's been kind, but distant. Kind." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Oh, careful. His name. It appears in no ledger. Yet he was at the banquet, the ball. I suspect he knows more than he says." Before Clara could reply, a shout rose from the square's edge. A stall had collapsed, its timbers splintered, revealing a hidden compartment beneath the cobblestones. Poirot darted forward, his flashlight illuminating a small vault, its iron door ajar. Inside was a leather satchel containing a forged deed similar to the one in the mausoleum, but naming Finch as a beneficiary, and a letter in Gideon's hand. "Finch, to secure a vault. Silence the air." "Sacre bleu," Poirot whispered, retrieving the satchel. "Monsieur Finch, the serpent's silent partner. He forged deeds to siphon wealth, betraying even Gideon." Hastings clutched his hat, his face pale. "Finch, that mousy solicitor, He's been under our noses the whole time, Poirot said, his voice sharp. He hid in plain sight, managing the Vane's secrets while feeding Gideon's greed. We must find him vite. The festival's music faltered as Poirot scanned the crowd, spotting Finch near a bonfire, his spectacles glinting as he slipped toward an alley. Poirot and Hastings followed, weaving through dancers, their lanterns casting long shadows. In the alley, Finch stood frozen, clutching a satchel identical to the vault's. His nervous smile vanished as Poirot stepped forward, the forged deed in hand. Monsieur Finch, Poirot said, his voice a velvet trap. This deed betrays you. You forged documents for Gideon, profiting from the serpent's coil. The vault, it was your safeguard, nest CP, to silence Clara if she claimed her inheritance. Finch's face crumpled, his voice a hiss. You can't prove it, Poirot. I was a clerk, nothing more. Nan, Poirot said, producing the letter. Gideon named you. The satchel. It holds your payment-smuggled gold, I wager. The constable awaits, summoned by my note. Finch bolted, but Silas Crow emerged from the shadows, his bulk blocking the alley. Not so fast, he growled, seizing Finch's arm. The satchel fell, spilling gold coins stamped with the serpent motif. The crowd gasped, gathering as Constable Brant arrived, his face grim. Mon Dieu, Poirot said, addressing the villagers. The serpent's coil is ended. Finch, the silent conspirator, forged deeds to steal your veil. Clara, your heir, will restored. Clara stepped forward, her voice ringing. The hall is sold its wealth for U schools, farms, a new start. No more serpents, no more curses. The villagers cheered, their anger turning to hope. Finch was led away, his spectacles askew, his betrayal exposed. Lady Vane, in custody, sent a letter confessing her fear of Gideon, absolving Clara. That evening, Poirot and Hastings sat in a village in its hearth warm, its air filled with cider's tints. Mon ami, Poirot said, sipping tea. The serpent's legacy is broken. Clara's courage, it redeems the veil. The glove, the clock, the vault hall lead here. Justice, it is served. Hastings raised his glass. It's Clara and your little gray cells, Poirot. The veil's free at last. Chapter 13. The echo of the coil, the autumn light over Grimstone Vale glowed like burnished gold, casting long shadows across the village's cobbled lanes, where the scars of the serpent's coil lingered like whispers in the wind. Hercule Poirot stood in the shadow of Grimstone Hall's west wing, forgotten annex sealed since the Vane family's rise. His overcoat, a dark silhouette against the ivy-clad stone. His mustache, a pair of polished crescents framing a face alight with curiosity. The blood-stained glove, stopped clock, hidden safe, ledgers, serpents, coil, torn photograph, cryptic map, poisoned chalice, coded letter, vicar's confession. Clara's airship, smuggler's tunnel, Gideon's arrest, and Finch's betrayal had resolved Lord Vane's murder. Clara's decision to sell the estate had stirred a new Rippler rumor of a lost Vane artifact. The serpent's eye, a jewel tied to the coil's origins, hidden by an unknown guardian. Poirot, delayed in his departure by a cryptic note, slipped under his inn door. Sensed a final echo of the conspiracy, Captain Arthur Hastings paced beside him, his tweed coat dusted with leaves, his eyes uneasy as he glanced at the boarded windows of the west wing. Poirot, he said, his voice low, I thought we'd finish with this blasted veil. Gideon's in chains, Clara's selling the hall, and the serpent's done. What's this about a jewel? Sounds like village gossip to me. Mon ami, Poirot replied, his voice a velvet blade slicing through the crisp air. Gossip is the echo of truth, distorted but present. The note the serpent's eye sees all. Protect Clara, or it strikes as no mere rumor. The coil, it seems, has one last twist. We must enter the west wing. The west wing was a relic of decay, its oak doors barred, its windows shrouded in dust and cobwebs. Clara had granted Poirot access, her resolve to sell the estate tempered by fear of new threats. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of mildew and old velvet. The corridors lined with faded tapestries depicting serpents and ship's echoes of the smuggling ring. A locked door, its frame carved with a serpent's eye, caught Poirot's attention. Using a skeleton key from Silas Crow, he opened it, revealing a study untouched by time, bookshelves sagging with moldy tomes. A desk strewn with papers and a sealed envelope, its wax stamp bearing the serpent's mark, "Interesant," Poirot murmured, breaking the seal. The letter, in an elegant, unfamiliar hand, read, "The serpent's eye is the vain legacy's heart. Hidden in the vault, guarded by the faithful, betray Clara, and it vanishes forever." A map, sketched on the parchment, pointed to a hidden vault beneath the west wing's floor. Hastings's brow furrowed. "Till the vault, to the festival's find. I'd hoped we were done with secrets. Who's this faithful?" A question. "We," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "A guardian, loyal to the coil's origins, perhaps betrayed by Gideon. We must find this vault." They pried at the floorboards, revealing a stone trapdoor leading to a subterranean chamber. The vault was a crypt of shadows, its walls lined with ancient chests, one containing a velvet pouch holding a flawless emerald, the serpent's eye, its facets glinting like a predator's gaze. Beside it was a diary, its pages detailing the jewel's history, stolen in the 1700s by a vain ancestor. It funded the smuggling ring, passed down through generations, and guarded by a secret keeper. The final entry, dated a month before Vane's death, named Eldred Marsh, a retired butler, as the last guardian, sworn to protect it from Gideon's greed. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, pocketing the jewel and diary. "Marsh, the silent servant, seen but unnoticed. He lives in the village. Nest C.E.Pa. We must find him." They returned to the village, where the harvest festival's remnants lingered, withered garlands, empty cider barrels. Eldred Marsh, a stooped man with rheumy eyes, lived in a modest cottage, its garden overgrown with thorns. He greeted them with a wary nod, his hands trembling as he poured tea. "And Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice raspy, the veils at peace. "Why stir old ghosts?" Poirot's smile was gentle but piercing. "Marsh, ghosts do not write notes. The serpent's eye, hidden in the west wing, named you its guardian. You knew of Gideon's crimes, yet stayed silent. Why?" Marsh's cup rattled, his face paling. "I served the Vanes for 50 years. The eye was their secret, not mine too. Till Gideon threatened my family, I had no choice." "No choice," Poirot said, producing the diary. "This says you swore to protect Clara, the heir, yet a note threatens her life. Speak, or the constable will." Marsh's shoulders slumped, his voice breaking. "I sent a note to warn you, not harm her. There's another, Mrs. Beatrice. Lyle, the postmistress. She was Gideon's spy, feeding him secrets, forging letters. She's still in the village, plotting to steal the eye." Hastings gasped. "The postmistress. She delivered our mail quiet as a mouse." "We," Poirot said, his mind racing. "The quiet ones, they are the most dangerous. We must confront her." They found Mrs. Lyle at the post office, a squat building smelling of ink and wax, her gray bun tight as she sorted letters. Her eyes narrowed as Poirot entered, holding the serpent's eye. "Madame Lyle," Hay said, his voice a velvet trap. "You served Gideon, forging his letters, spying on Clara. The eye, it tempts you still. Nest C.Pa." Her hands froze, a letter fluttering to the floor, its serpent seal glinting. "You've no proof," she snapped, but her voice quavered. "Nan," Poirot said, producing Marsh's diary. Your name, it appears here, linked to forged deeds. The letter you hold, it matches Gideon's script. The constable awaits. Mrs. Lyle lunged for a drawer, pulling a small knife, but Silas Crow, alerted by Poirot's earlier note, burst in, disarming her. The villagers, gathered outside, murmured. As Constable Brant cuffed her, Clara, summoned to the scene, clutched the serpent's eye, her face resolute. "This jewel," she said, "will fund the Vale's future hospital, not a curse." Poirot addressed the crowd, his voice clear. "Madame et messieurs." The serpent's echo is silenced. Mrs. Lyle, the last conspirator, is exposed. Clara's legacy will heal your Vale. That evening, in the inn's cozy parlor, Poirot sipped tea, his eyes reflective. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, "the coil began with greed, but ends with hope. Clara, she is the Vale's redemption." Hastings raised his glass. "To Clara and your little gray cells, Poirot. The Vale's truly free now." The chapter closed with Mrs. Lyle's arrest and Clara's final act, a satisfying epilogue that vanquished. Chapter 14. The shadow of the Vale. The autumn breeze over Grimstone Vale carried a whisper of renewal, its golden light gilding the village's cobbled lanes. Yet a new shadow lingered, as if the Vale's past refused to rest. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of a forgotten orchard, its gnarled apple trees heavy with fruit, their branches casting jagged patterns across the dew-soaked grass. His overcoat was impeccable, his mustache a pair of polished crescents, framing a face alight with curiosity. The blood-stained glove, stopped clock, hidden safe, ledgers, serpents, coil, torn photograph, cryptic map, poisoned chalice, coded letter, bullet casing, forged, will, locket, smuggled statuette, dagger, deed, vault, coins, and serpents. I had unraveled Lord Vane's murder and the smuggling ring, securing Clara's heirship and the Vale's future. Yet a new mystery had delayed Poirot's departure. A threatening letter slipped under Clara's door, warning of a Grayson curse tied to the sale of Grimstone Hall, hinting at a rival family's vengeance. Captain Arthur Hastings trudged beside him, his tweed coat snagging on thorns, his brow furrowed as he clutched the letter. "Poirot," he said, his voice edged with unease, "I thought we'd put the Vale's troubles to bed. Clara's selling the hall, the serpents. Coil is done, but this Grayson curse business is dashed unsettling. Who are the Graysons?" "Mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice a velvet blade slicing through the morning's chill. "The past, it is a shadow that clings. The Graysons, a rival family, once owned this Vale before the Vanes claimed it. This letter," he tapped. "The parchment speaks of a curse, but Hercule Poirot sees a plot. The orchard, it hides secrets." The orchard, on the Vale's outskirts, was a tangle of ancient trees, their roots clawing at a stone well, its rim carved with a faint crescent moon, a symbol absent from prior clues. Clara had mentioned the orchard as part of the estate's sale, but village whispers spoke of a Grayson Vane feud, centuries old, tied to a lost relic. Poirot's flashlight swept the well, revealing a hidden compartment beneath its rim, containing a brass key etched with a moon and a coated parchment, its script a cipher. "The crescent pact binds the Vale. Quayson's claim rises with the moon interescent." Poirot murmured, pocketing the key and parchment. "A pact hidden here, where none would look. The Graysons seek to reclaim the Vale. N'est ce pas?" Hastings's eyes widened. "Reclaim it? Through a curse? Sounds like more vain nonsense." "Nan," Poirot said, his gaze sharp. "A curse is but a story to mask ambition. We must visit the Grayson Manor, crumbling estate on the Vale's northern edge, was a stark contrast to Grimstone Hall. Its stone facade cracked, its windows dark. Mr. Alistair Grayson, the patriarch, greeted them in a parlor of faded grandeur, his silver hair and hawkish eyes exuding authority. "Mr. Poirot, he said, his voice smooth but cold. "You've stirred enough trouble in our vale. Why come to my door?" Poirot's smile was polite but piercing. "Monsieur, a letter threatens Clara Vane, speaking of a grace and curse. Key found in the orchard, and this parchment, coded, suggests a pact. You know of it, I think." Grayson's hand tightened on his cane, his composure fraying. "Old tales, nothing more. The Vanes stole this veil from us centuries ago. If Clara sells, it's no concern of mine." "Brilliant," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "Yet the crescent moon, it is your family's crest. We shall see." Left the manor, but Poirot's instincts led them to the village archive. A dusty hall of records where a librarian, Miss Agnes Holt, helped uncover a 17th century deed. It revealed a pact between the Vanes and Graysons, splitting the veils. Wealth, sealed with a relica crescent moon, pendant to prevent war. The deed hinted at a vault beneath the orchard, well guarded by the Graysons. Returning to the orchard at dusk, Poirot used the brass key to unlock a hidden door in the well's base, revealing a spiral staircase to a subterranean vault. The chamber was small, its walls etched with moon symbols, its center holding a pedestal with the crescent moon pendant, its silver gleaming. A letter beside it, in Alistair Grayson's hand, read, "The pact is broken. The veil is ours, or Clara falls. Soccer." Blue Poirot whispered, pocketing the letter and pendant. "Grayson seeks to revive the feud, using the curse as a weapon. But there is more a traitor in the village." Back in the village, a lantern-lit gathering marked the estate's sale announcement. Clara stood on a wooden platform, her voice steady. "The hall's wealth will build a school, a hospital. The veil's ours, not cursed." A murmur rose, but Poirot's eyes caught a figure Miss Holt, the librarian, slipping behind a barn, her satchel bulging. He followed Hastings at his heels, finding her burning a letter, its crescent seal visible. "Mademoiselle Holt," Poirot said, his voice a velvet trap. "You aid Grayson, n'est-ce pas?" This letter, it matches his hand, spied for him, stirring fear of the curse. Holt's face paled, her hands trembling. "I had no choice. Alistair promised me wealth, said the Graysons would rise." "I didn't mean harm," Nan Poirot said, retrieving the charred letter. "But you spread fear, threatening Clara. The constable will hear of this." Silas Crowe, alerted by Poirot, restrained Holt as Constable Brant arrived. Poirot confronted Grayson at the manor, presenting the pendant, letter, and deed. "Monsieur, your curse is a lie. Your pact a plot to steal the veil. The pendant, it proves your claim, but your betrayal ends here." Grayson's defiance crumbled. "The Vanes took everything," he spat. "I wanted justice." Clara summoned, held the pendant, her voice firm. "Justice is the veil's future, not your feud. This pendant will fund our hospital, not your greed." Chapter 15. The Whisper of the Spire. The autumn sun bathed Grimstone Vale in a golden haze, its rays piercing the last wisps of fog that had long shrouded the village. Yet a new shadow whispered from the spire of Grimstone Hall's clock tower, a looming sentinel of weathered stone. Hercule Poirot stood at the tower's base, his overcoat a dark silhouette against the morning's glow, his mustache a pair of polished crescents framing a face alight with relentless curiosity. The blood-stained glove, stopped clock, hidden safe, ledgers, serpents, coil, torn photograph, cryptic map, poisoned chalice, coded letter, bullet casing, forged will, locket, smuggled, statuette, dagger, deed, vault, coins, serpent, eye, and crescent pendant had resolved Lord Vane's murder, the smuggling ring, and the Grayson feud, securing Clara's heirship and the veil's renewal. Yet a new mystery had stalled Poirot's departure. A cryptic message, carved into the clock tower's door during the estate's final inspection. The spire holds the order's truth. Clara's dream dies unless the vow is kept. Poirot's little gray cells hummed, sensing a hidden society tied to the vain legacy. Captain Arthur Hastings stood beside him, his tweed cap askew, his eyes tracing the tower's ivy-clad spire, which pierced the sky like a silent accusation. "Poirot," he said, his voice tinged with exasperation, "I thought we'd seen the last of this veil's secrets. Clara's selling the hall, the serpent's coil is dead, and the Grayson curse is done. This order of the spire sounds like another tall tale." "Mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice a velvet cadence cutting through the breeze. "Tales are the masks of truth. The message speaks of an order, a vow, and a threat to Clara. The clock tower, it whispers secrets older than the serpent's coil. We must climb." The clock tower's entrance was a narrow oak door, its carvings of spires and stars worn but distinct, unlike the serpent motifs of prior clues. Clara had reported the message, found by workers preparing the hall sale, and village lore whispered of a secret society, the Order of the Spire, tied to the Vane's rise. Poirot pushed the door open, revealing a spiral staircase of creaking wood, its air thick with dust and the faint temps of incense. At the top, a locked chamber awaited, its brass lock etched with a star. Using a skeleton key from the estate's caretaker, Poirot opened it, revealing a circular room lit by a single rose window, its stained glass casting star-shaped patterns. Across a stone table. On the table lay a coded scroll, its parchment brittle, its script a cipher of stars and numbers. Beside it was a silver ring, engraved with a spire and the initials O as order of the spire. Poirot's heart quickened as he unrolled the scroll, deciphering its message. The order guards the Vane legacy. Star of the spire, hidden below, binds the vow. Betray it, and the veil burns. A map on the scroll pointed to a hidden chamber beneath the tower's base, iridescent. Poirot murmured, pocketing the ring and scroll. A society, older than the smuggling ring, sworn to protect a relic, the Star of the Spire. But who guards it now? Hastings frowned, clutching his lantern. Another relic. After the serpent's eye and the crescent pendant, I'm starting to think this veil's cursed with treasures. "None," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "Cursed with secrets, mon ami. The Order's last member threatens Clara's plans. We must find this chamber." They descended to the tower's base, where a concealed trapdoor, marked with a star, led to a subterranean chamber. The room was a vault of shadows, its walls etched with celestial runes. Center, holding a pedestal with a sapphire pendant, the star of the spire's facets glinting like a frozen galaxy. A letter beside it, in a modern hand, read, "Clara's sale breaks the vow. The star returns to the order, or she falls." The signature was a single initial, W. Mondier. Poirot whispered, securing the pendant and letter. "A new conspirator, W, seeks to revive the Order's power. We must identify them." We returned to the village, where a farewell gathering for Clara was underway in the churchyard, its gravestones softened by autumn flowers. Clara, radiant in a green cloak, thanked the villagers for supporting her Vishuna hospital school, funded by the hall sale. Yet, her eyes flickered with unease, the carved message weighing on her. Cairo's gaze settled on widow Agnes, weaver, a reclusive seamstress who had sewn Clara's gowns, her sharp eyes and quiet demeanor unnoticed until now. She wore a silver ring, its spire design matching the chambers. "Madame Weaver," Poirot said, approaching her stall of embroidered shawls. "This ring, it is curious. It matches one found in the clock tower, tied to the Order of the Spire. You know of the star, n'est-ce pas?" Weaver's needle paused, her face tightening. "You meddle, Mr. Poirot. The Order's old, forgotten. I'm just a seamstress, frame it." Poirot said, producing the letter. This W. It is you, I think. You carved the message, threatening Clara to protect the order's vow. The star of the spire. It is your charge. Weaver's hands trembled, her voice low. The veins swore to guard the star, to keep the veil's peace. Clara's cell betrays that. I only meant to scare her. Scare? Poirot's tone was unyielding. You revived a dead society's threat. The letter, the ring, they betray you. Da. Constable will hear this. Weaver bolted, her shawl fluttering, but Silas Crow, ever vigilant, blocked her path. Not this time, he growled, holding her arm. The villagers gasped as Constable Brant arrived, summoned by Poirot's note. Poirot revealed the pendant, its sapphire catching the sunlight. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, the order of the spire is no more. Widow Weaver, its last member, sought to halt Clara's vision. The star will fund her dream, not a curse. Clara stepped forward, holding the pendant. This ends the veil's shadows, she said, her voice firm. The star's wealth will build our future, Weaver confessed, her defiance crumbling. She was the order's last keeper, sworn to protect the star, but acted alone, fearing Clara's cell would erase the vain legacy. Brant led her away, and the villagers cheered Clara, their hope restored. That evening, in the inn's warm parlor, Poirot sipped tea, his eyes reflective. Mon ami, he said to Hastings, the spire's whisper is silenced. Clara's courage buries the past. The glove, the clock, the star led here, justice. It triumphs. Hastings raised his glass. To Clara and your little gray cells, Poirot. The veil's finally free. Chapter 16. The serpent's lair, the fog that had clung to Grimstone. Veil, like a shroud, now seemed a distant memory as Hercule Poirot stepped off the train onto a bustling London platform. The city's clamor car horns, vendors' shouts, and the clatter of hooves greeted him with a sharp contrast to the oppressive silence of the Vale. His polished shoes clicked against the cobblestones as he hailed a cab, his mind already racing through the labyrinth of clues that had led him here. The ledger from the smuggler's tunnel, its pages dense with coded transactions, had pointed to a single destination, a nondescript office in Cheapside, the heart of London's financial district. This, Poirot was certain, was the serpent's lair, the nerve center of Mr. Harrel's grand conspiracy. The cab rattled through narrow streets, past soot-stained buildings and flickering gaslights, until it stopped before a modest brick edifice. Its sign read Harrel and Associates, financial consultants, but the windows were dark, the curtains drawn. Poirot paid the driver and adjusted his Homburg hat, his mustache twitching as he surveyed the building. Mon ami, he murmured. To himself, the serpent hides in plain sight, but it cannot escape the eyes of Hercule Poirot. Haye approached the door, its brass knocker tarnished with neglect. A faint light flickered through the crack beneath, betraying life within. Poirot tried the handle locked, as expected. From his pocket, he produced the rusted key found in Silas Crow's shed, its purpose still a mystery. To his surprise, it turned smoothly in the lock, granting entry with a soft click. The door creaked open, revealing a dim hallway lined with dusty portraits of stern-faced men. The air smelled of ink and old paper, tinged with something acrid smoke. Perhaps. Poirot moved silently, his cane tapping lightly as he navigated the corridor. A faint rustle came from a room at the end, where a sliver of light spilled onto the floor. He paused, his little gray cells humming. The ledger had named Harrel as the serpent, the mastermind behind Lord Vane's murder and the land fraud scheme that spanned decades. But Harrel was no fool. He would not remain in London unless he believed his tracks were covered. Poirot's task was to catch him before he vanished into the city's underbelly, taking the final secrets with him. The room beyond was a small office, its walls lined with oak cabinets stuffed with ledgers and files. A single oil lamp cast shadows across a cluttered desk where papers were strewn as if abandoned in haste. At the far end, a fireplace crackled, its flames licking at a pile of documents. And there, hunched over the hearth, was Mr. Harrow's gaunt face illuminated by the fire, his hands trembling as he fed another sheet to the flames. "Monsieur Harrow," Poirot said, his voice calm but cutting through the silence like a blade. "You are, I think, destroying evidence that would not please the courts." Harrow spun around, his eyes wide with panic. His once impeccable suit was rumpled, his cravat askew. "Poirot," gasped, clutching a sheaf of papers. "How did you find me?" Poirot stepped forward, his cane resting lightly in his hand. "The ledger from the smuggler's tunnel, monsieur, was most talkative. It spoke of your transactions, your false deeds, your serpent's coil that strangled Lord Vane and sought to claim Grimstone Vale. But you did not expect Hercule Poirot, did you?" Harrow's lips curled into a sneer, though fear flickered in his eyes. "You're too late, Poirot. The evidence is burning. By morning, there'll be nothing left to tie me to anything." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Non, monsieur. The truth, it does not burn so easily. Step away from the fire, if you please." Harrow hesitated, then lunged for a poker by the hearth, brandishing it like a weapon. "Stay back. You don't understand what's at stake." Poirot remained unmoved, his gaze steady. "I understand perfectly. A scheme of land fraud, built on forged documents and blackmail, with Lord Vane as your obstacle. You killed him, did you not? At 3:13 a.m. in his study, where the clock was stopped to mark your crime." Harrow's grip on the poker faltered, his face paling. "You can't prove it. No one can." Poirot gestured to the desk, where a half-burned ledger lay among the papers. "That, monsieur, is where you are mistaken. The ledger from the tunnel names you as the financier, the serpent. In these papers you burn. They will not all turn to ash before I have what I need." With a snarl, Harrow swung the poker, but Poirot was ready. He sidestepped neatly, his cane flashing up to knock the weapon from Harrow's hand. It clattered to the floor, and Harrow stumbled back, his bravado crumbling. "You're a devil, Poirot," he spat. "You think you've won, but there's another someone bigger than me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Another. Speak, monsieur, and perhaps the courts will show leniency." Harrow laughed bitterly, sinking into a chair. "Leniency? You don't know who you're dealing with. The serpent's coilets, not just me. There's a name even I fear to speak." "Then write it," Poirot said, sliding a notepad and pen across the desk. "And quickly, before the flames consume what little honor you have left." Harrow stared at the notepad, his hand trembling. For a moment, it seemed he might refuse, but the weight of Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. He scribbled a single name, then shoved the pad back. Poirot glanced at it, his expression unreadable. "Most interesting," he murmured, pocketing the note. "Now, monsieur, you'll come with me to Scotland Yard." But Harrow was not done. With a desperate cry, he lunged for the fireplace, hurling the remaining papers into the flames. Poirot sprang forward, seizing a ledger from the blaze, its edges singed but its contents intact. Harrow scrambled for the door, but Poirot was faster, barring the way with his cane. Non, monsieur. The game, it is over." As Poirot restrained Harrow, a new sound broke the chaos of soft click from the hallway. Poirot froze, his senses alert. Someone else was here. He dragged Harrow to the door, peering into the darkened corridor. A shadow moved, swift and silent, vanishing around a corner. "Who is there?" Poirot called, but only silence answered. He turned back to Harrow, who was now slumped against the wall, defeated. "Your accomplice, perhaps?" Poirot asked. "Or this bigger name you fear?" Harrow shook his head, his voice a whisper. "You'll see, Poirot. You'll see." The police arrived within the hour, summoned by a nearby constable whom Poirot had flagged down. Harrow was taken into custody, his protests fading as he was led away. Poirot remained in the office, methodically sorting through the surviving documents. The ledger he'd saved from the fire was a treasure trove, pages of coded transactions, forged land deeds, and correspondence linking Harrow to a network of brokers across England. But it was the name Harrow had written Sir Alister Crane that gnawed at Poirot's mind. Crane was a shadowy figure, a financier rumored to pull strings in London's highest circles. His name had surfaced in whispers during Poirot's inquiries, but never with evidence. Now it was scrawled in Harrow's trembling hand, a thread to the final piece of the puzzle. Poirot tucked the ledger under his arm and stepped into the night, the city's pulse quickening his own. The next morning, Poirot sat in a quiet tea room near Trafalgar Square, the ledger open before him. A tea, sipped his tisane, his eyes scanning the pages. The codes were complex, but Poirot's mind was a machine of precision. By cross-referencing dates and names, he unraveled a pattern. Crane had funneled money through Harrow to purchase vast tracts of land in Grimstone Vale, using forged deeds to claim properties that rightfully belonged to the Vane estate. Lord Vane's refusal to sell had made him a target, and his murder had been the final act to secure the scheme. But why had Crane remained in the shadows, and who was the figure in the hallway? Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Japp, his old friend from Scotland Yard, who slid into the seat opposite. "Well, Poirot, you've done it again," Japp said, grinning. "Harrow's singing like a canary, though he's still cagey about the details. Says he was just a cog in a bigger machine." Poirot nodded, sliding the notepad across the table. "This name, Inspector Sir Alister Crane. It is, I think, the key to the machine." Japp's grin faded. "Crane, he's untouchable. Poirot, big man in the city, friends in Parliament. You sure about this?" "Certain," Poirot replied. "But we must be cautious. Crane is a serpent of a different kind, one with fangs that reach far." Japp leaned back, whistling softly. "What's your next move?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A visit to Sir Alister, I think. Polite call, to see how he reacts when the name of Hercule Poirot is mentioned." That afternoon, Poirot arrived at Crane's mansion in Mayfair, a grand edifice of marble and glass. A butler ushered him into a lavish study where Sir Alister Crane awaited. He was a tall man, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, with eyes that seemed to weigh Poirot like a ledger. "Monsieur Poirot," Crane said, his voice smooth as silk. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Poirot smiled, settling into a chair. "A matter of business, Sir Alister. A ledger found in Cheapside, with your name attached to certain transactions." Crane's expression didn't waver, but his fingers tightened on the armrest. "Ledgers can be forged, monsieur. Psh, I'm a busy man with many enemies." "Perhaps," Poirot said. "I," said no knight, keener, nor do they flee in the night. Your associate, Mr. Harrow, was less discreet." Crane's smile was then Harrow, a minor player. If he's implicated me, he's lying to save himself." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but unyielding. "Then explain, Sir Alister, why your name appears in a coded letter signed the Serpent. Explain why Lord Vane died when he threatened your plans. Explain, or I shall explain to Scotland Yard." For the first time, Crane's composure cracked, a flicker of fear crossing his face. He rose, pacing to the window. "You're a clever man, Poirot. It's too clever, perhaps." Before Poirot could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the room, a gunshot from the garden. Crane flinched, and Poirot was on his feet, cane in hand. "Stay here," he ordered, rushing to the window. Below, a figure in a dark coat sprinted across the lawn, vanishing into the shrubbery. The same shadow from the office, Poirot was certain. He turned back to Crane, who was now pale, his hands shaking. "Who was that, Sir Alistair? Another accomplice, come to silence you?" Crane sank into his chair, defeated. "Not an accomplice," he whispered. "A warning. They know you're here." "They?" Poirot pressed. Crane shook his head. "I've said too much. Take your ledger, Poirot, and leave me be. You'll find nothing else here." But Poirot was not so easily dismissed. He spent the next hour searching the study with Crane's reluctant permission. In a hidden drawer, he found a single letter sealed with a serpent's crest. Its contents were brief but damning. Instructions to Harrow to deal with Vane and secure the Vale's deeds. It was signed with a single initial, A. That evening, Poirot returned to his flat, the letter and ledger safely locked in his safe. He sat by the fire, his mind piecing together the final threads. Crane was the mastermind, but the gunshot suggested a larger network's one watching, waiting. Shadow in the hallway, the figure in the garden, they were the same. Poirot was certain. A final accomplice, perhaps, or a rival seeking to claim Crane's empire. He penned a note to Jap, detailing the evidence and urging a warrant for Crane's arrest. But as he sealed the envelope, a knock came at the door. Poirot opened it too. Find a young woman, her face half hidden by a scarf. Clara, the secret heir, stood trembling in the doorway. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "I heard you found Harrow. But there's something you must know, something about my father's death." Poirot ushered her inside, his mind racing. "Speak, mademoiselle. It's the truth. It is the only way to end this." Clara's eyes were wide with fear. "It's not just Harrow or Crane. There's another. Someone who was at the hall that night. Saw them in the shadows before my father died." Poirot's heart quickened. "A name, mademoiselle. Give me a name." She hesitated, then whispered, "Mrs. Elspeth, the housekeeper." She wasn't just a servant. She was part of it all. Chapter 17. The family's reckoning. The train to Grimstone Vale rattled through the countryside, its rhythm a counterpoint to the frenetic pulse of Hercule Poirot's thoughts. The ledger from Harrow's office, now safely tucked in his valise, had confirmed the land fraud scheme with Sir Alistair Crane as its shadowy architect. But Clara's revelation about Mrs. Elspeth, the housekeeper, had ignited a new spark in Poirot's little gray cells. It's a quiet woman who had hovered at the edges of Grimstone Hall, her nervous hands and downcast eyes unnoticed by all. But Poirot was no mere servant. She was a thread in the serpent's coil, and Poirot was determined to unravel her role before the conspiracy slipped through his fingers. The Vale's fog greeted him like an old adversary as he stepped onto the platform. The station was deserted, save for a lone porter, who tipped his cap and vanished into the mist. Poirot adjusted his overcoat and set out for Grimstone Hall, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the cobblestone path. The town felt different now, less oppressive, as if the arrest of Harrow and Lady Vane had loosened the grip of fear. Yet Poirot knew the mystery was not fully solved. Mrs. Elspeth's involvement, and the shadowy figure who had fired a warning shot at Crane's mansion, suggested a deeper layer to the enigma. At Grimstone Hall, the great oak doors creaked open to reveal Clara, her face pale but resolute. She had returned from London that morning, determined to claim her rightful place as Lord Vane's heir. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling only slightly, "I knew you'd come. The family is waiting in the drawing room. There." Unsettled, Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching. "And Mrs. Elspeth, mademoiselle, where is she?" Clara's eyes darted to the staircase. "She's here, but she's been strange locking herself in her room, refusing to speak. I think she knows you're close to the truth." "Bond," Poirot said. "Then let us gather the family, and we shall see what truths emerge." The drawing room was a cavern of faded grandeur, its velvet drapes heavy with dust and its chandelier dimmed by neglect. The Vane family sat in a tense semicircle. Clara, her scar barely visible in the soft light. Young Master Edmund, Lord Vane's nephew, whose sullen demeanor hid a keen intelligence. Miss Beatrice, the Lord's spinster cousin, her knitting needles clicking like a metronome. And Captain Roland Vane, a distant cousin and retired naval officer, whose weathered face betrayed a lifetime of secrets. The air was thick with anticipation, each relative eyeing Poirot as if he were both savior and inquisitor. Poirot stood at the center, his hands clasped behind his back. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and commanding. "We are here to lay bare the truth of Lord Vane's murder and the conspiracy that sought to steal Grimstone Vale. The serpent's coil, as the telegram called it, has been severed in part. Mr. Harrow and Lady Vane are in custody, their roles exposed. But one thread remains, and it is here, in this house, that we shall cut it." A murmur rippled through the room. Beatrice's needles paused, and Roland's jaw tightened. Edmund leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean, Poirot?" he asked. "You've caught the culprits. What more is there?" Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on each face. "There is always more, Monsieur Edmund. Crime, such as this, it is like a tapestry pull. One thread, and the entire pattern shifts. And the thread I pull now is Mrs. Elspeth." The door opened, and the housekeeper entered, summoned by Clara's earlier command. Mrs. Elspeth was a slight woman, her gray hair pulled tightly into a bun, her apron immaculate despite the hour. Her eyes, however, betrayed her darting, fearful, as if she sensed the net closing. "You wish to see me, sir?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oui, madame," Poirot said, stepping closer. "You have been most discreet, a shadow in this house. The shadows, the cast shapes, and yours has revealed much. You were in the study at 3:13 a.m., were you not? When Lord Vane was killed." Mrs. Elspeth's hands twisted in her apron. "I told you. I heard a scream, nothing more." Poirot raised a finger. "Non, madame. You saw more? You saw the murderer, or perhaps you were the murderer's accomplice. The blood-stained glove in the garden, the stopped clock, coded papers, all point to someone who knew the house intimately. Someone like you." A gasp escaped Beatrice, and Roland rose, his fists clenched. "This is absurd, Poirot. Elspeth's been with the family for decades. She's no killer." Poirot turned to him, his eyes sharp. "Loyalty, Captain Roland, is a noble trait, but it can blind. Let us examine the facts. Mrs. Elspeth, you claimed to hear a scream, yet no one else in the house did. You were near the study, yet you saw no one leave. And then there is this." He produced a small object from his pocket, a tarnished silver locket, its clasp broken. "It's found in the smuggler's tunnel with a photograph inside. It's a photograph of you, Madame, and Lord Vane, taken many years ago." The room fell silent, the air heavy with shock. Mrs. Elspeth's face crumpled, and she sank into a chair. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "I loved him, would never harm him." "Then explain," Poirot said, his tone softening but unyielding. "The truth, madame, or the courts shall demand it." Mrs. Elspeth's story spilled out in halting fragments, each word a weight lifted from her conscience. Decades ago, she had been more than a housekeeper. She had been Lord Vane's confidant, his secret love before his marriage to Lady Vane. Their affair had ended, but her loyalty remained. When Vane uncovered the land fraud scheme, he confided in her, unaware that Harrow had already ensnared her in his web. "He threatened to expose me," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Harrow knew about my past, about the locket. He said he'd ruin me if I didn't help him." "Help him how?" Poirot pressed. "I let him into the study that night," she confessed. "I didn't know he'd kill him." I thought it was just a talk, to make Vane agree to the deal. But then I heard the scream, and when I ran in, Vane was dead, and Harold was gone. I stopped the clock to mark the time to make sure someone would notice. Poirot nodded, his mind piecing together the scene. And the glove, the papers. The glove was mine, she admitted. I dropped it in the garden when I ran out, trying to find Harold. The papers. I took them from the study to protect Vane's name. I burned some, hid others in the crypt. Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling with anger. You betrayed my father. You let that monster into our home. Mrs. Elspeth flinched, her hands covering her face. I didn't mean for it to happen, Clara. I swear it. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Madame Elspeth, your confession is a step toward justice, but it is not enough. There is another, the shadow in the hallway, the figure in Crane's garden. Who was it? Mrs. Elspeth shook her head, her voice barely audible. I don't know. Harold spoke of someone above him, someone he feared. He called them the broker. The name sent a ripple through the room. Roland's face darkened, and Beatrice's needles fell silent. Edmund's eyes widened, as if a memory had stirred. Poirot turned to him. Sir Edmund, you know something of this broker, do you not? Edmund hesitated, then spoke, his voice low. I heard Vane mention the name once, years ago. He said the broker was a ghost, someone who moved money and men like chess pieces. No one ever saw them. Poirot's mustache twitched. A ghost, perhaps, but one who leaves footprints. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall find him. The conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. A constable entered, his face grim. Monsieur Poirot, a message from Inspector Japp. Sir Alistair Crane has escaped custody. Slipped out during a transfer to Scotland Yard. They're combing London, but he's gone to ground. Poirot's expression remained calm, but his eyes gleamed with determination. Then the hunt continues. But first, we must resolve the matter of Grimstone Vale. Turned to Clara, who stood rigid, her eyes fixed on Mrs. Elspeth. Mademoiselle, Clara, you are the true heir, as the ledger and the burned will fragments confirm. The forged will was a distraction, meant to sow discord among the family, while Harold and Crane claimed the land. But you are Lord Vane's daughter, and this estate is yours. Clara's shoulders straightened, a spark of resolve in her eyes. What about her? She asked, nodding toward Mrs. Elspeth. Poirot considered this. Madame Elspeth's crime is grave, but her confession may mitigate her punishment. She will face the law, but her heart, it was not the heart of a murderer. Roland stepped forward, his voice gruff. And the estate. The land fraud deeds tainted everything. How do we rebuild? Poirot smiled faintly. With truth, Captain Roland. The ledgers will expose the false deeds, and the courts will restore the land to its rightful owners. Grimstone Vale will heal, as will this family, if you choose unity over greed. Beatrice spoke for the first time, her voice sharp. And what of this broker? Crane's gone, they're still out there. Poirot nodded. Oui, mademoiselle. The broker is the final piece, and I shall find them. But for now, let us focus on what is before us. The family agreed to convene again that evening to discuss the estate's future. Mrs. Elspeth was escorted to her room under the constable's watch, pending her transfer to the authorities. Clara lingered, her hand resting on Poirot's arm. Thank you, monsieur, for seeing what I couldn't. Poirot bowed slightly. It is the work of the little gray cells, mademoiselle. They see what the heart sometimes misses. That evening, the family gathered in the dining hall, a long table set with flickering candles. The mood was somber, but hopeful, as if the truth, painful though it was, had begun to mend old wounds. Clara took her place at the head, her presence commanding. Despite her youth, Roland and Beatrice flanked her, while Edmund sat quietly, his earlier sullenness replaced by attentive respect. Poirot stood, addressing them one final time. Mies Amos, the tragedy of Lord Vane was not merely a murder, but a fracture in this family. The Serpent's Quell sought to exploit that fracture, to turn you against one another. But you have a choice now to rebuild, to honor your father's legacy. Clara nodded, her voice steady. I want to restore the Vale, to make it what my father dreamed, place of community, not greed. Will you help me? Roland's weathered face softened. Alas, I've seen enough of the world to know family's worth more than land. Beatrice set her knitting aside, a rare gesture. I'll manage the accounts, no more secrets. Edmund hesitated, then spoke. I can survey the land, make sure it's used right, for the Vale, not some schemer's pocket. Werrell's heart warmed at their resolve, but his mind was already elsewhere. The broker, the shadow, the gunshot, they lingered like a discordant note in an otherwise resolved symphony. As the family continued their discussion, he slipped out into the night, the fog curling around him like a cloaked dot at the village inn. Poirot found a telegram waiting from Jap. Crane spotted near Dover. Possible ship to France, pursuing. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Dover was a smuggler's haven, a fitting escape for a man like Crane. But the broker, were they with him, or watching from afar? He returned to his room, spreading the ledger and letter on the desk. The serpent's crest on the letter caught his eye, its intricate design, a clue he'd overlooked. He traced it with a finger, recalling a similar emblem in Lord Vane's stooge's seal on a forgotten deed. Fetching his notes, he confirmed it. The crest belonged to an old shipping company, long defunct, but once tied to the Vane family's trade ventures. A knock at the door startled him. It was Silas Crow, the gamekeeper, his face etched with unease. Monsieur Poirot, I heard you're still hunting. There's something you should know about the night Vane died. Poirot gestured for him to enter. Speak, Monsieur Crow. Every detail matters. Silas shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't just patrolling the woods that night. I saw a boat down by the cliffs, not one of ours. It was loading crates, and there was a man giving orders. Couldn't see his face, but he wore a ring with a snake on it. Poirot's pulse quickened. A snake like this? Key showed Silas the letter with the serpent's crest. Silas nodded. Exactly like that. The pieces were falling into place. The broker was no ghost. They were a figure tied to the sea, to the smuggler's tunnel, to the crates Poirot had found. And the crest linked them to the Vane family's past. Poirot thanked Silas and sent him away, his mind racing. The broker was not in London or Dover. They were here in Grimstone Vale, hiding in plain sight. The next morning, Poirot returned to the derelict chapel, where the crypt had revealed the first ledgers. The fog had lifted, and sunlight streamed through the cracked stained glass windows, casting colored patterns on the stone floor. He descended into the crypt, his flashlight illuminating the dusty corners. The trapdoor that had nearly killed him was still there, its mechanism rusted but intact. But it was the altar above that drew his attention. A faint scene suggested a hidden compartment. With careful pressure, Poirot opened it, revealing a small box engraved with the serpent's crest. Inside was a single document, a contract dated 20 years prior, between Lord Vane and an unnamed partner, granting rights to coastal land for maritime ventures. The partner's signature was a scrawl, but a wax seal bore the same crest, and beneath it a name, Ezekiel Thorne. Poirot's breath caught. Thorne was a name he'd heard only in passing, a reclusive merchant who had once owned half the Vale's docks. He had vanished years ago, presumed dead. But what if he wasn't? What if Thorne was the broker, the mastermind behind Crane and Harrow? Poirot hurried back to the hall, where Clara was overseeing repairs to the garden. Mademoiselle, he said, Do you know the name Ezekiel Thorne? Clara frowned, then nodded. My father mentioned him once. Business partner, long ago. He disappeared after a scandal. Something about smuggled goods. Poirot showed her the contract. This man, he is the broker, and I believe he's still here, in the Vale. Clara's eyes widened. But where? The village is small, someone would have seen him. Poirot smiled faintly. The best hiding place, mademoiselle, is where no one looks. A smuggler's tunnel. The boat, Silas Southey's, are his domain. That night, Poirot and Clara ventured to the coastal cliffs, guided by the cryptic map from Silas's shed. The tunnel's entrance was hidden behind a tangle of brambles, its damp walls echoing with the crash of waves. Poirot's flashlight revealed fresh footprints in the sand, leading to a cavern where crates were stacked high. And there, at the far end, stood a figure in a dark cloak, a ring glinting on his hand. Ezekiel Thorne, Poirot called, his voice echoing. Your game is over. The figure turned, revealing a weathered face, scarred and gaunt. Poirot, Thorne said, his voice a low rasp. You're persistent, I'll give you that. Clara gasped. You killed my father. Thorne's laugh was cold. Harrow did the deed, girl. I only gave the orders. Vane was a fool, clinging to his land, when he could have been rich. Poirot stepped forward, his cane raised like a scepter. Okay? And you, monsieur, are a fool to think you could outwit Hercule Poirot. The ledges, the contract, the crest, they all point to you. The serpent's coil ends here. Thorne's hand moved to his pocket, but Poirot was faster, signaling to constables who had followed in secret. They surged into the cavern, restraining Thorne before he could draw a weapon. The crates were opened, revealing forged deeds and smuggled artifacts enough to convict Thorne and dismantle his empire. Back at Grimstone Hall, as the family gathered once more, the weight of the truth settling over them. Clara, now fully recognized as the heir, vowed to restore the Vale's honor. Mrs. Elspeth's confession had led to her arrest, while her cooperation ensured a lighter sentence. Crane was recaptured in Dover. He and Thorne's confession tied the final knots in the conspiracy. Poirot stood before the family, his task complete. The serpent's coil is no more, he said. The Vale is yours to rebuild, with truth as your foundation. As he boarded the train back to London, Poirot gazed out at the fading fog, a rare smile on his lips. The enigma was unraveled, the family reconciled, and the little gray cells had triumphed once again.